we shall start our technical session 1. The topic of this technical session is historical background and its impact on ethnic coexistence in Manipur. To begin with this session, I would like to request respected Professor W. Nabakumar Singh, retired Professor, Department of Anthropology, Manipur University, Moderator of Technical Session 1, to be on the stage. May I now request Research Scholar Representative Hemam Rashouria to felicitate our moderator for the first technical session. Further, I would like to request our resource persons, respected retired Professor N. Joykumar Singh, Department of History, Manipur University, respected Dr. Homen Thangjam, Department of Political Science, Indira Gandhi National Tribal University, Regional Campus, Manipur, respected Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam, Center for the Study of Social System, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and respected Professor C.H. Ibohal Meitei, Manipur Institute of Management Studies, Manipur University, to kindly come forward on the stage for the felicitation. May I now request Research Scholar Representative to Hemam Rashouria to felicitate our eminent resource persons for their kind presence. Thank you very much. To continue the session, I would like to hand over this session to our moderator, sir.
Research Club, Manipur University, amadi Manipur University Students Union Anina, Pullaga Silang Liba, no Mayoiba academic discussion on a roadmap for restoration of normalcy in Manipur. Thorum Sige, Ahanba technical session. Historical background and its impact on ethnic coexistence in Manipur. Haiba, Timsida Pantok Diba, Thorum-sida lengbirakliba punamak po ay ahanba magtada ay moderator gi iwit sinjana madi sililangli bagi mahut sinjaraga mayambu taramna oksari loina loina na sigumba technical session na si hauwa yana bagi ayabadu mayamgi mafamdagi lawjari akoy ngasi sigumba hanba technical session historical background and its impact on ethnic coexistence in Manipur ibasida koy akangai resource person marina wangang bigani hanbada Professor N. Joykumar Singh, retired Professor Department of History, MU, Professor Ibohal Meitei, MIMS, MU, Dr. Homen Thangjam, Department of Political Science, IGNTU-RCM, Dr. Angomcha Bimol, Akoijam, GNU, New Delhi. Program ki matung ina di ako ye session si pung tara dagi hogada bani du kitang schedule time pung kai muk sonda raga pung tara makai kum batare adu lunch break si 12:30 dagi na 1 ba lunch break ni adu sinja sindi langbi riba singi aya ba logjaraga aina resource person singi mafam da nong na hangkat chaning basi yama bada minute kundagi na kun manga bawgi manungda loisan biu maramdi mi mari ngang manina pungkhai mamam gumbagi matam ngang pung ani aduga sam khoige discussion gi matek session discussion namasu leibanina at least kisik kun manga dagi na kun tra bawgi manungda sanga bada yaragadi duda loisan bina ba thamjari aduga aina ai sincerely believe that all learned resource persons in the aiba matam singa na sati ganedana duna ai matam yamna lawjararoi ai yoiba wafam horen aroi bada thamjage aduna ahan mamakta dai koksanjage ahan ba resource person ikai khumnajariba Sri Professor N. Joykumar Singh sagi wafam khara thambina bukingota koksanjari
ngasi Manipur University research scholars singbiraga pangthokpiriba nomagi oiba khoigi khana nainabagi thoram masigi asiguma morning session asida moderator gi phongpham langda lengjan biriba aigi marup Professor W. Nabakumar Singh loyana ngasigi asigumba discussion asida saruk yaminariba Dr. Homen Thangjam, Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam, Professor C.S. Ibohal Meitei loyana aigi mangda lengsan beriba Professor Preorangent Dr. R.K. Nimai loyana ngasigi asigumba discussion nasibu mai paan bigani haina lembirek-liba miyoi punamak research scholars sing punamak koi ngasigi siliba discussion asigi magi maruiba thimdi a roadmap for restorations of normalcy in Manipur yam phajai masimaksi akoigi maruina koigi laibak asta lairiba akhang ahi aduga intellectual singi apambani but the question si masigi apambasi kamaina uhin sige hairaku matamdadi koi sometimes we have to see the historical the real ground reality su udaba yarak tabi posak kharaslai ai hek lakpadagi howna aina nganga dori si kari no ai chai chukang khandra dum lakjabani ai angang sing nei gonda lakpada oja history libiu na as ai wari libagi thabak si to osida hai naina phagi tawgi but now ngasi di topic asi ubadadi now it is a very very serious issue maramdi karigino haiba matamda akoi ngasi thoiba khara sangna chathaba yai haina panariba asigumba thogdok asi masida akoina karigumba khara pot khara shanti porpu yana ba peace porpu yana ba wakhan khan min na ba yana ba gi road map ama same si haibi idea si lakpa matam da di practically it is a very difficult task. It is, in a sense, it is a great challenging task in a logic. Manipur karino Manipur combined same ki akwe tareba group si karino haiba sidi hojikti thokraba thodok sigi matung dadi angang macha ama ho yamna bunna khangaba posak ama oirabani na ai adongi angle da ai changin dar. But ihan habada aina thanjan issue makhak lai maramdi Manipur agi leriba people singa se it is broadly constituted by 3 groups of people. Akoy masibu ngasidi Meitei haibam lere Naga haibam lere Kuki am lere ai barup Professor Nabakumar naga akoy anina hanak Delhi da unengi government gi maru mi singu nabada quite gi fajana explanation pi gi bachi ai maru professor ko Nabakumar ne pi bani Naga haibase kanano Kuki haibase kanano Meitei haibase kanano wai khangam da basing fajana khangi aduna hariba Naga amasung Kuki haibase masi gi piriba tam ani ese masi Manipur da British na piramba khudu labani akoi right from the very early period of time akoi gi history da akoi gi leriba colonial administration lagtang gi mang da Manipur da Naga chu leti Kuki chu leti akoi di magi leriba ethnic group adugi maming da kaurga makoi gi barata akoi kheda bangta thamdana akoi gi history asi laki ba adu British ki magi divided rule policy amaka ki lakpagi framework asi manungda ngasagi blanket oiba wahi si puthoga Naga Kuki amasung Meitei hairaga pikraba Manipur da tungda ethnic class ama lakpa yabagi lambi se masi British na sebam bani haibasi it is historically it is a fact masigi issue wasna maram oiragani ngasi aikoi ngasi thengnariba problems singas aduna hariba sidisida khwaidagi nuaiba trend de akoi hajiksu sida yauriba keynote address yawi Manipur se chahi lising ani gi history leibani hai chahi lising ani gi history habisi already recorded history akoi de madu history kawe proto history recorded laktani history ni pre-history madu so proto history lagi mambadi adi maktat mamang dadi akoi mythology gi legendary account mayam lai masi punamak si yenguragadi ngasi bak leiriba akoi gi laibak se akoi ngasi Manipur hina kaurisi matawna Manipur ko to maming kaya am korame mase chahi million kaya hen liraba laiba amane masida koi human civilization na se chahi million kaya gi batam di hono koi lakh rabani but only on 33 AD the Manipur gi historical king amakhak laaga masdagi Manipur gi history sagatli habi wada ai madugi ethnic ki laiba problems ai bodom ai changin jarado masi laba matong dadi ngasai hariba series da akoi da valley da 33 AD da panba horkadu koi valley dagi ni aduna hariba valley dagi panba horkaduriba madugi ningthau adugi dynasty se masina more than 2000 years pale Manipur da Bharat punribo so this is the unique characteristic features of the history of Manipur maramdi Prithvi the civilization kya like Greek civilization, Roman civilization, Mesopotamian, Harappan civilization, Mohenjo-daro civilization, so many civilizations. Ado civilization abata chahi lising of phagi but whereas in the case of Manipur, particularly in Ningthauja dynasty ki matang chahi more than 2000 years pan bai base. Akoina Manipur si pick pese akoina akoigi leriba structure, akoigi society si leri posingje. But if we look from the global point of view, it is one of the most beautiful, unique, characteristic feature of it. Masigi feature as the Kanana La E Hamilton, Akoi Masigi leadership as a Manipurgi, the labor leadership as a Masi Meitei in a line. Aduna, the responsibility of the Meitei people. Manipur gi dariba hojiki road bed semada khangde amada khangchangde akoina hojik leriba akoi gi sideda punbiriba akoi gi leriba generation sida chu khangde the Meitei have to play a very important role in the process of the restoration of system darkar oi habisum ai aham badai thamjage masi ai commonly question nati baramde it is proof, it is evidence by the historical reality masi ki portion amatan da asyamna sangraba sida akoi Meitei singi mindset akoi Meitei singi mindset Manipur haibase akoi na ngai na lawe Manipur gi leriba geography khangde history khangde culture khangde pudam ase akoi Meitei na ngai haibase akoi mindset yawe an haiba mindset ase akoi masi dum chatharaga sumnai asina maram oiraga akoi na ngasagi hariba cookie gi bayam unari posi leire ko ai bayam se na khangbira mane khale ngasi gi cookie gi isu lai ba se masi hekta tangi megi tang hum da hor panate masi actually it was started in 1955 ki hor isu mane very slow long process man long process ase megi tarik hum da fugai pi wadari ada masigi historical process lai ada khwai gi hen sathi badi akoi ain ujagadori project matam sangna leminaramba matam sangna khoi leminar laba Manipur gi developmental society developmental process ta civilizational process ta yamna chawno role lor khiba kangbu ohum ne akoi cookie su absob role lor khoi khang naga su absob role lor akoi batam naga cookie question nati magi bai magi leriba ethnic community adu bitin lor masina bharot ta Manipur na so lisamaga samapan nifuga mapan ge October gi tang trama ga officially pulba matung da ngasagi cookie amasung naga singna akoi Meitei gi leminar roi haidra ihu ma hore that we call it Naga integration movement cookie singisu in course of life the question is why kari gi damakta bharot ta pundriga jadi hairam daba bharot ta pullaba matung da naga singna akoi gi naga singi identity ama laigadabani cookie singo identity ama laigadabani outside the Meitei gi leriba posak asi gi wangbada laigadabani haina hairi basi kari gi no haibachima akoi yengdaba yaro aduna aina as a students of history ain haijaning bade every historical event kudimakta deep rooted oiba magi history yawde akoi madugi history se khangdragade akoi diagnosis tobaga moi hidak thabaju ngamoi adu targade what was wrong or what is wrong on the part of Meitei people leche koi khangdo pi tangai phadam lai masigi process asidani ai masi haijari si baram kari gino ame tunda ngasai road map am semagi idea am york padida road map se kari ban semga dege hype targade we have to study the history and masi sebak da bokna matunda kari darkar jebo Meitei na krai jaga da land bagi haibasi akoi isada mung yeng jabagi tangai phadam lai aidi achobani aidi ahibani aidi akhangmani haina ithada pakchauro chawdu su yar oi we have to see the ground reality masigi ground reality ase yeng si hairako matamdadi akoina Meitei singi oi posak singsi ko yeng da ya aigi naton gi sumang na apak ndi mi gi di urga dang da phatre hen hairu ye but what about us akoi gi di haibasima akoina road map se semada akoi gi asoi ba jakoi point out to butai akoina that is called communist ki tam dar self criticism haji akoi isana isagi togjeri ba thabak sing se akoi review to gi dagai phadaba lai maram de kari gi nu haiba matam da Manipur na British ta pan gi mamang dari ngasai feudal administration gi mami do laga ningthau haiba sin supreme authority all the area entire Manipur belong to the king ngasai forest gi nu jagi ai khangde no gi ain gi thabak khangde but king is the supreme authority hariba king ase kanano oir page hamtando Meitei no oir aduna masigi process asigi banungda makhoi da chahi cha kaya asigi leminar ko tamda mogi nungai taba nuai ba nungsidabagi even mayam leram ngare but mainly because of the feudal administration मदन फैक्टर म ओरगा मखोई से मदो मखोई अपांग बजे फोंदो पंगमम दबसु याय अदुबो द मोमेंट we merge into India da merge to batam dadi akhoi da leramba decision lobagi right akhoi gi laibak akhoi da left chak da bagi ski right punama se akhoi na India da surrender to matung dadi ngasai gi akhoi da ngasai ning thona Manipur da leramba magi controlling authority lekhi da batam dadi makhoi gi nuai ta singa do mado mapan thol ide masigi pot ase as a Meitei akhoi khang da yaro masigi pot asi thore asumai thor ko matan dagidi matang sagar pa hore ba re ai gasai pri ku ngamai tan jogi isu la kono ko kono ai bodum da changsin da roi mardi ai mang da ai ko gi Dr. Nimai lady bo yam khangwe mi pot asi gi mamut tan khangwe mung da ai Dr. Nimai amane ne lojadi aduna taseng na jogi concept ase masi ai for your kind information ai nga ki moroi na naron sing ki khangum da yai khale 1955 ta ti gobin haida Manipur ki assembly da deputy minister oiramba amaka ki child ko brain child ado ma ki mana sa pa dinate marani makhoi gi lebe chin group ki singsta mana masi ki posi kanantar yarakti chuka yarakti even lagal denga khang da amate yarakta basi kam sathi ne yarakte gi bu aigi chhatra se ai masi information pijabadi aigi chhatra ge ai my first PhD student ji se na ma gi history gi subject by topic ase history and culture of Jomi na man hai ai da ai ngai ado iri history am phajai magi metal ju phajule phajai ai na masi phungdu u na hai ba ju phungdu ke khal kan da ai masak khangde matam dra angang khara laga oja magi lai phungdu hang do kari gi no ham tun magi lyrics da cookie singu jo ni hai akoi yadi phung agadi ma khudung charoi hai so well about some 2 or 3 decades ki mamang da yada ba putam do ngasidi yara thori de so this is called the planning masibu kari ko planning goes but in the case of Meitei people ngasi bhor koi planning leite akoi emotion all of the launi se katani koi planning to darkar hoy akoi map se darkar hoy akoi masigi punama ase ohensi hairap matam dadi akoi da we have to examine we have to revisit our history aduna hojiti gotra je pasigi reason kayamarum binari kayamarum khangari kayamarum nainari aduga taseng na if I look from purely from the administrative point of view di yutar lagadi ngasai gotona ase pung amada solve to yabi issue de it was not an issue pung amada solve to yabi issue se ngasi 6 months chakha lisi kari gi noi bisum chu aku yeng batai who are the behind the masigi thodo asigi maning da kana legi ko yeng batai akoi no kuki ngata da naga ngata da Meitei ngata blame to yaro we have to see masigi Baramni kaino for every historical event kuning ai na hoji hai hangat chaki ba dune magi root legani madigi course legani madigi support to ba biyam legani ana the question de tarik ahum de gotara je thue tarik mari da akhoi section 355 chalai re hai chalai di hai gyan ta da pot am lei re state government asida to hum thokba Manipur state government chief minister haibam lei maybe competent, may not be competent, that I do not know. Adubu, chief minister, amna tauba yaba thabak se tauhun gidre. Adikidi mogi kari kaman numan mayam haijale, sipai mayam thajale. Aduga, for about more than 20 days, 2 min letoga, akoi masen hatuk na hali. Why? The question is why? Still, we are not able to give the answer. Adutari, there is something behind it. Masigi pot na siya ay Ojan Nabakumar ay sama barabar yaw la pari da koi khang ba kharle aduna masi yam hangde manui now situation is very serious now akoi khang ye se akoi da hojik se da pangangang bi wadre if you go to somewhere you will find the degree of the seriousness of this hojik is and masigi social akan se the question di akoi da kai do ga gi have ay yam nungai Manipur gi miyam na hai Maruina Mapangi outside university kabun hai Asiana Lurba issues the Manipur University Kadori Hagi. I say, let me tell you very frankly, Madam now people question the wisdom of the Manipur University. Madam the society am a lit over society of the guide people say university matone. Madam the university have say intellectual and the pull in Miam Lojay. Adu 100 hogi with the Chumna meeting a money over the university is still labor community number role over game say. Still this is the question. I must say Hariman Kagino, I should Jagas the Horok. When people criticized me, I was very shocked. Madam the Akoijam University, how could I start to sing TV that could York me? I don't know. I couldn't have seen Pangang Mapani Mini University from the quick Kangam way. Maduki spirit though. Madu Hojiki labor, Quiggy labor, fraternities the Yob of say Kangdale. I don't know. Masigi social apparatus Nasidi. I don't know after a long gap of more than 10 years. I think Nasidi University play poems and labor, walk her Nanja Pung business among the organizer with Tagachari. And the Masigi social level of Tamsida. A queen of Kadogu no. High is the question technically. Madam de a quickie dosazing as I told Nambi of the Yauri. A quickie Meitei Singh Yam Pajaba character lay. I'm on a high, I'm on a tad of the quite Pajaba character. I'm on a hyper, I'm on a taroi, I'm on a Nangba, I'm on a Takari, I'm on a Tower of me, a quick lay. Sometimes I cut the joke of Meitei culture, Waiku culture here. Waiku is among Tagari, among Kakalaki, among Tindani, among Kakari, among Tansakan. I don't know. A quite a road made on the same sea, Hakum, the Hoji and you. A quick calame. I mean, Salaga, Ports in Loy again. Yes, Masi, I mean, Sagi party that was loud in me. I mean, Sala for them. Or I mean, Sala here in the social life. Then why? Nasi, a quickie labor, you then defense minister, man, high of the Kande, covering Matun high of the day. Nasagi Poppy sing a say, Yar Force plane, Troga Maita, Hatani high, Hajo Hati. I don't know. I don't know what the Tajagadoris. To whom? I don't know what the Tajagadoris. Aroibadri, I Isamu to Tajarak. At the Tajadaba mistress, ma'am, in Marakta, Akoigi Labor University community. Intellectual singer, lit to Buki Dakar or Pumatangam, Laki Badi. I don't take of the thing and a secret. Discussing Tori say, I yam na pain a kali. Adubo, Kitan the honest over the carway. Madam de honesty, sincerity, and transparency is one of the basic fundamental of Adugumba, quality in university community. Other Masigi Susuma, I Tamjage Masigi Batanga Hojikte, I Batamsu am Sanga, Loja road map issue la kusida. Hoji a quick dogu Kangde. I the Tamdari question day. I must have a Warubinuko. A Koigi Manipuri territory integrity supply hit the Yai. Separate states to pick the Yai. But Manipuri Kai. Kabana something negative have issue lay. 1992 the Naga singer Kukiga. Don't give a land at all. Nasi over 100 dream. Tanti lag dream. Nasi Hoji some Saribu Sarkar Ladyba, Power Punamak Lairaba, Matik Sava authority right Lairaba, Asi Ho with the Equise, Moirang the cross of Bungam dream. Anna Hojik say, I Nasai, Masi Meitei, or Hijabanico. I did testing with the Meitei as a hiding the Manipur logs of me. And the message is social accountancy. I could Nasidi, Palen Wang Malan de, Segmai Wang Malan de, Moirang Wang Malan, I could hero in the lady. Could hero, Meitei, hero. Message is social as I am checking with the guard way. I don't know. Why did Luri say? Pung Amada sword to Yabi Sudo, Tataruk Tanga Iba say, it is not a matter of joke. Something is behind the script. I must say, Chinadabungam, they carry no have the Hibangam. I do it Targade. Masiguba situation assistant. A queen now started normal Sima Poloxi Kalaba. Kariguma Karagi, Makeda Porsi Kurdi, Kanana, Ahamada, कनान इनिशिएट तौगदगे हाइबदा आइना खंजबददी अखोइसे अखोइ मैतेई सिंग इनिशिएट तौगदबदि खले मैतेई ने इनिशिएट तौसे हाइतादि क्रमाइन तौबताई हाइबन वी हैव टू चेंज आवर माइंडसेट अखोइ माइंडसेट चेंज तौब दरकार ओय माइंडसेट चेंज तौदि मखै अखोइद करिगु बखलगी डेवलपमेंट पोरकनी हेबसा इ थाजजदे अदो माइंडसेट कमाइन चेंज तौरकनी हाइदुदि अखोइगी माइक त पारगा खबर दा हापगे ओइगदो बरति अदो आइना थमजरिबसे आइना माइंडसेट चेंज तौगदबदि आइना थमजरिबसे मसी आई चुम्मी नटगा लाली हाइबा पोट नते नैनबियो खनबियो कमाइ तौर चेंज तौगदगदि हाइबसु खनबियो तौबसी चुम्मी खलगदि हाइना आई थमजबदि आई मसिना एजिफ मसे चुम्नगी चुम्मा पोसा अबदि हाइजब नचत अदुना मसिगी पोसक सिंग सिला मतंद आइदी याम सेंगना थमनिंगे मरमदि अखोइ कुकी के बैठक के फुने हिदे आई फुनेदि हाइने मरमदि आई वाज द फर्स्ट पर्सन इन मणिपुर मसिगी इशू से अखोइ बदो अमित शाह के मान हाइबने मरमदि दिस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट असे इट इज अ डायरेक्ट चैलेंज टू द नेशनल सिक्योरिटी ऑफ इंडिया से ई हाइगी ngasi di mado foreign minister so haire ngarang nahan da after 6 months RSS ki chip na haire ani ko khabar se as RSS the chip na haire very fine adu orgadi on the basis of this information noi thabak to rodna haire gadi thabak su tawd diye so this is something very very serious aduna makhoi gi political gi oiba posak khar gi phagna bhona badu da akhoi gi innocent mayam sing se hada hali chi manum kari gi no habse this is my basic question ada masigi question sing sila matum da aina Meitei gi da handra matum da for every action khudimuk da kari go lan to na batara agadi akoi first line of defense second line of defense third line of defense is military technology di yaw bangat aduna akoi na ngasi kuki ga Meitei khanna base akoi na masi lan amani log targadi what about the defense line of Meitei people Meitei sigi defense line kari do मसी गसी बोद अखोइ मसी खनदे अखोइ वाखन सु खनदे थबक नसु ओंथोकते हाइर रगन अखोइ पलांग लो लाउनी मिगिने प्लानिंग म बखार चथरे अखोइ ngasi ओद प्लानिंग लेते मसे दिस इज द बिगेस्ट मिस्टेक ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ द Meitei people अन मसीगी पोसिंग असे अखोइ सिमदोपगि तंगाइ फदब लाइन खल अदुना अखोइने लेरिसे मयाम लो खनब गातनिको अखोइने लेरिसे एंटायर मणिपुर की टेरिटोरी असिगे so 8.2% खतने मैं किसी तेनी अदो कोई बी तादव यादव इरा कर मसी 8.2% ऐसे लाइरगा अखोई जे पेंथो कदोरी ब्राव अखोई मसीरा अखोई सिरे हीरो सरगा अखोई जे Meitei नि चागदोरी ब्राव then what about our lifeline अखोई की lifeline क्राइ दनो ngasi di sida leribo oja sing sidi tolop chaw charga haying pencil sulpa crore phangaga lagini but what about your children what about your next generation lakadu angang skindu gi lambi do akhoi ngaji thadat pa yabra ngasi akhoi hairi ipa ipu na thambiram ba ipa ipu lari hai tabisu thambiram ba lari hai ba akhoi ngaji hat ka dimon kori gino lari khai ba ko ngasi gi lari khai ba be na thalaba doctorate mem oiraba akhoi mangai ri hai ba pongjel ba kabu sing na akhoi gi angang tungda lak angang sing live thadi man kori gino masi akhoi khanbiyo I bring you people. Please come to the people. People see martala o. Aduga ngasagi lady ba ngasi de loyal am nalai ba kangbu gi nupi sing lari la su hajida ba nupi sing aduna. Magi thatara no pu iba masa adu da marai ba to chupi raga ma khud chupi raga mana popre sa ba phani to sibi raga nang khul ga oso ne thadok na karam ba imphal le ba mi di yauri sei da. Asi posi realize to masi posi realize tau di makhede you will not get anything aduna akhoi aham bada masi road si semba yana bgen nokte de akhoi mindset change to dakar hoy lono akhoi initiative khar dakar so hoy ektak bai am par khoi policy hai bi yaroy tinaba hai base tinaba integration hai base chumnagi bai ekta pairaga ai ga nanga tinisin yaroy integration de pot mari dakar hoy number 1 most important point economic integration economic integration like that integration like that cultural integration like ni lo political integration like that अदो गसिदी अखोई इकोनॉमिक इंटीग्रेशन लेत्रे जिंग तंग की मरते इंटीग्रेशन लेते अखोई माइंडसेट असो अखोई मणिपुर की अपन की पिक्चर अखोई माइंडसेट याउदे यस बाउंड्री दे अखोई उई अखोई लमसी बाउनी हाइबदे अखोई खंगे बट व्हाट अबाउट द पीपल हाइबदे अखोई मसी उबंगम दे दैट थिंग मसी माइंडसेट से अखोई चेंज तो दरकार ओय अन मसी चेंज तो दे मखैदे चुमनगी स्पीच में पीबने यारोय चुमनगी डिस्कशन में यारोय चुमनगी आई हाइरबदे थोरपने यारोय अदुना हौजिकते अखोई इंटेलेक्चुअल सिंग अखंग आई सिंग सीनियर खंडे जुनर थोरगा अखोई कैदौ सिगे हाइबसे कैमरा मीटिंग दरकार ओय सिगुम्बा गैदरिंग अमदा अखोइना तगदो प्लानिंग सिनी ने खनबा याबा पोनति अचुम्बा खुदिमा हाइबे यादे अचुम्बा हाइबसे समटाइम इन द कॉन्फ्लिक्टेड सिचुएशन इज द अखोई अचुम्बा हाइबे यादे अदुना अखोई माइंडसेट असिदा अखोई से कनानो हाइबे आइडेंटिटी अमा खसे अखोई पुरम खंगमिनरगा अखोइना कैदौ सिगे हाइबा वफम खनरगा अखोई इनिशिएट तौरगदी आइना खंजबददी नॉर्मलसी से लाकने खले मरमदी डिसीजन लौगदोरसे अखोइना नत्रबदिना डिसीजन लौबदना अखोइना बबोदे अखोइ नहान नॉर्मलसी परपुंगमगनी डिसीजन दुदी अखोइ वांगबदा लैखरे मसिना मरम ओरगा अखोइना करम मखलगी टेक्निक करम मखलगी पॉलिसी मखादा अखोइ करी डिसीजन लौसिगे habsi खनबगी तंगाई फदब लैबसिदा मणिपुर यूनिवर्सिटी लाइक लाइसु हाइरब खंग हाइरब बयामना इंटेलेक्चुअल लीड तोबियु हाइजरगा आई स्वादि सुम लोचनगे थैंक यू ऑल
Thank you very much, Professor Joykumar. Mathangda koi koksanjage Professor C.H. Ibohal Meitei MIMS.
ngosigi sigumlaba numagi oiba academic discussion on a roadmap for restoration of normalcy in Manipur. Thorom sigi ahanba session sigi moderator when election biriba kai khumnazariba Professor W. Nabakumar Singh. Loina na. Co-panelists oina election biriba resource persons mingwina panjarabada Professor N. Joykumar Singh, Professor Angomcha Bimol, and Dr. Homen Thangjam, aduga topa session gi Professor oina mang election biriba kai khumnazariba yambung arkinimai retired IS Professor Prioranjan, learned members of the faculties, young scholars, ladies and gentlemen, mayam punamak ahanba kada kono ni kai khumna buchari ngasimak Manipur da thoiba thodoga se yamna laibak thiba puarigi tangkama haibadu oire na thamjage adubu chenthariba matamgi khongjel saida thengnada da yadaba tangka khara thengnabani aduna lakadriba matam kharasitati aikoi amuktang tin yotha minaraga chapkhut lamjel da aduga chapkhut maigei da changba yaranabagi wakhal kharadudi khanminaba mathau tai hena phongdokjage hoji aikoi gi leiriba Manipur gi tongan ba puari gi machaching madugi matang de yam hena thamjaroi dege imang da so hena khoi gi oja sing na thambi khre aduga aina as a scholar of management ki mahirwe moina phauza base Manipur da tongan tongan ba ethnic communities leiriba singse aikhoi loinamak Meitei bo haisira Kuki bo haisira Naga bo haisira or natre haga Meitei Pangal bo haisira punamak singse malem gi saukhat lamjil saida aikhoi se aduk hakna saukhat ba yaudreba swathana lehoraba kangluk ngaktani haina aidi phausei yes akhoi da culturally yam rich hoijaba chatnabi nat ki tongan ba makhal gi mamal naidraba lan mayam ama leijaraga su senmit lon gi ama sung technology gi advancement mayam si yengrobo matam dadi lamdam se yamna sothana lehori aduna ngasi mak thoiba thaudo se amromda developmental gi imbalance oiba maram khara aduga loina na aikhoi hana puruk kangluk tongan jerga su tuna homin kaminarakna chauminarakpa adugumba ethnic coexistence sama lairambado matam khara sidadi aikhoi population ki dynamics si achauba ahomba ama lakpa si koi uzai maramaduna masina su achauba akhoi gi pamdaba thodok mayam ama thorunanabagi maram ama oigadra haibase aigi fauzabani maramdi keno heda 1951 da India na ahanba oina ningkha tamabu matungi post independence ki census da leigiba akoi gi Manipur gi population mada leigiba akoi gi ethnic communities singi percentage aduga madugi mamang da leiramba adudagi dum zatharak paduna ngasi churagma 2023 or 21 census da leidiba madugi oibasi yang matamdadi asuki matik khetnaba se koi thole aduna mishingi masing manadabagi keno se tholak pasina tongan ba aspirations tholakani aduga tongan ba magi job ki aspiration resourcing sigi madugi khudong chaba launana ba aduna makhan gi tongan ba politically over influences mayamna smaram moidna aikhoida nungsi nadana nabagi maram che chauna sagalakpagi amakak inod amasu piram gadra haibagi ai thadazabani maram aduna kaidore aikoi 1951 das 56% and above warambado hojiti 44% ki mayada koi ki kanosi oide aduna achauba demography gi imbalance ma lay aduna masi akoi muni yengsin minaba changi aduna aina ngasi khajitang masi gi platforms lojaraga scholars singna share tawira koi gi matungna ina khajitang thamjaning basidi the impact of present crisis of Manipur and role of youths haidana somdo ina khajitang ai thamjage aduna thoiba thodok SSD yamna laibak thiba thodok ni asigama thodok sina maram oirakanda kaidore masine piriba sapu sidi kangluk animakta aduga aikhoi gi overall normal lives of the people inhabited in the states it has been affected dramatically in various aspects of the activities aduna law shingu gi lamda aduga tongan ba pot puthok jaraga hingjaramba mayam singchigi punsi marelda achauba sapu mapirakpa nga yokpa nga gi machinak phangaktaba adugi sijalakpa law phajana panba ngamaktaba aduga mahi marong phajana thaba ngamaktaba aduga loina na pire iba economy gi area saida aikhoi gi the loss of jobs aikhoi da virtually or physically geographical divide amagi mindset am create tore adna young minds sing saida achauba sapu ma pire adna psychological trauma amasu aikoi youth sing saida aduma phawbirangani aduga loina na kaidore many people had been displaced from their local places masaki mayum maram namda leijana hingna bagi punsi marel saida awang ba punsi marel ma hingba ngamjidriba akoi gi kunai sina ngasi kangluk ki irang na maram moiduna lanje naraga leiriba singsi punsi marel karam oirangadage aduga makoi da phauram gatauba aduga imung kaya gi magi nungsi jaraba members ꯃꯄꯥꯡ ꯅꯠꯇ꯭ꯔꯒ ꯃꯥꯒꯤ ꯁꯩꯊꯩꯗ ꯂꯩꯔꯤꯕ ꯃꯌꯥꯝ ꯑꯃꯒꯤ ꯊꯋꯥꯏ ꯃꯥꯡꯈꯤꯕ ꯃꯇꯝꯗ ꯐꯥꯎꯔꯝꯒꯗꯕ ꯑꯋꯥꯕ ꯃꯌꯥꯝ ꯑꯗꯨꯕꯨ ꯑꯗꯨꯝꯅꯗꯤ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯀꯥꯟꯗꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯍꯤꯡꯗ ꯌꯥꯗꯕ ꯆꯠꯇ ꯌꯥꯗꯕꯅꯤꯅ ꯃꯗꯨꯒꯤ ꯏꯆꯦꯜꯗꯨꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯆꯠꯃꯤꯟꯅꯗꯧꯔꯤꯅꯤ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯊꯦꯡꯅꯔꯤꯕ ꯁꯥꯐꯨꯗꯤ ꯀꯩꯗꯧꯔꯦ ꯏꯀꯣꯅꯣꯃꯤꯗ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯏꯟꯗꯁꯇ꯭ꯔꯤ ꯇꯧꯖꯔꯒ ꯍꯤꯡꯖꯔꯝꯕ ꯃꯆꯥ ITꯒꯤ ꯂꯝꯕꯤꯗ ꯍꯧꯖꯤꯛꯁꯨ ꯑꯗꯨꯝ ꯁ꯭ꯇꯤꯜ IT and IT-enabled services-ꯗ ꯁꯦꯟꯊꯣꯛ ꯂꯝꯕꯤ ꯂꯩꯖꯔꯝꯕ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯁꯥꯐꯨ ꯐꯪꯉꯤ ꯏꯟꯇꯔꯅꯦꯠꯀꯤ ꯐꯖꯅ ꯀꯩꯅꯣꯁꯤ ꯐꯪꯗꯕꯅ ꯃꯔꯝ ꯑꯣꯏꯗꯨꯅ many of the clients from the rest of the world ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯊꯕꯛ ꯇꯧꯖꯔꯝꯕ ꯃꯗꯨ ꯃꯥꯡꯉꯛꯏ ꯑꯗꯨꯗꯩꯗꯤ ꯇꯨꯔꯤꯖꯝꯒꯤ ꯂꯝꯗ ꯃꯅꯤꯄꯨꯔꯁꯦ ꯃꯇꯝ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯁꯦ Switzerland of the East ꯍꯥꯏꯗꯅ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯁꯦꯟꯊꯣꯛ ꯂꯝꯕꯤ ꯇꯥꯅꯅꯕ ꯍꯣꯠꯅꯔꯝꯕꯁꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ worldꯒꯤ ꯊꯝꯕꯥꯛꯁꯩꯗ ꯑꯁꯨꯛꯀꯤ ꯃꯇꯤꯛ ꯅꯨꯡꯉꯥꯏꯇꯕ ꯇꯥꯡꯀꯛ ꯑꯃ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯗꯨ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯕꯅꯤꯅ ꯍꯧꯖꯤꯛ almost reduced to zero ꯑꯗꯨꯗꯒꯤꯗꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯇꯣꯉꯥꯟ ꯇꯣꯉꯥꯟꯕ ꯂꯝꯕꯤꯗ ꯁꯥꯏꯀꯣꯂꯣꯖꯤꯀꯦꯜꯒꯤ ꯁꯣꯁꯤꯌꯦꯜꯒꯤ ꯑꯁꯄꯦꯛꯁꯤꯡꯁꯩꯗ ꯃꯥꯒꯤ ꯅꯨꯡꯁꯤꯖꯔꯕ ꯐꯦꯃꯤꯂꯤ ꯃꯦꯝꯕꯔꯁ ꯀꯥꯏꯅꯔꯛꯄ ꯑꯗꯨꯗꯒꯤ ꯂꯣꯏꯅꯅ ꯗꯤꯁꯄ꯭ꯂꯦꯁ ꯇꯧꯔꯛꯄꯅ ꯃꯔꯝ ꯑꯣꯏꯗꯅ ꯀꯩꯗꯧꯔꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯗ ꯍꯤꯡꯅꯅꯕꯒꯤ ꯂꯝꯕꯤꯁꯩꯗ ꯄꯥꯝꯗꯕ ꯂꯝꯕꯤ ꯆꯠꯂꯛꯅꯅꯕꯒꯤ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯃꯆꯥꯛ ꯑꯃꯁꯨ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯄꯤꯔꯛꯇꯕ ꯅꯠꯇꯦ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯃꯍꯩ ꯃꯁꯤꯡ ꯇꯝꯕꯤꯕꯒꯤ ꯂꯝꯗ ꯏꯗꯨꯀꯦꯁꯟꯒꯤ ꯂꯝꯗ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯆꯠꯊꯣꯛ ꯆꯠꯁꯤꯟꯒꯤ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯟꯁꯄꯣꯔꯠꯀꯤ ꯂꯝꯗ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯆꯩꯊꯦꯡ ꯀꯌꯥ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯄꯤꯔꯒ ꯂꯥꯛꯏ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯌꯪ ꯄꯤꯄꯜꯁꯤꯡꯁꯩꯗ ꯂꯩꯔꯤꯕ loss of job the loss of mutual trust among the communities machi achauba gap amani aduna aikhoi khajitang yengminaba yaba se Manipur se amna pikpa state ama khakni lejariba population se so sumnagi approximately 30 plus lakhs muktani recent latest census na thamjaba tare mamangi 2011 gi census da is 28.5 lakhs Hengalabada hosi 35 mayam uktani 35 lakh ki population haibase Bharat ki oina achauba state amagi district amagi population na hele haijare let's pick up any damn district of UP or Madhya Pradesh Rajasthan Maharashtra lakh yankai gi mathakta ngaktana yamba mogi population se the big state amu say that we have all our own government all the chief ministers, all the chief secretaries, bureaucrat officer, mayam amana akoi run tauriba state amane haba. Whereas in case of UP, the disumnagi the senior ESP amaga the district magistrate amaga na run tauram tauri nevadugi population se geographical area da su atuna akoi gi lairiba governance se muki hena koi strengthen tauba kitang introspect tauminaba akoi kitang kumna nenamina bachangi masigi matang si laku madam sa de aikoi se note sun reason gi manung sa da Manipur se awang no poki chidai se da border state oiribna maram moidna aikoi gi many of the developmental fronts ta aduga yamna aikoi gi active concern on laigado wasi khara khazik madugi khudung chaba se mangbra haibagi akoi keno se lai aduna kamhaina lake haikanda Akoina India gi Act East Policy gi say that domains the khajitang yengjaba matamda akoi Manipur se transition highway transition railway power dana akoi gi Moderator sectors na gateway ka oira ne yam kanna akoi chahi lisang sitna starting from 1992-93 side gi akoi hauraga lakpani aduga 2014 onwards akoi gi Act East Policy olaktana India-ASEAN engagements dagi akoi East Asia amasung akoi Indo-Pacific region si yaure harakanda chau thokna yengakna nabagi machat amasudum lai aduna matang saida koina yengba yaba se geopolitics ki tongan ba machat ama khaksu akoi yam chauna influence tawbra haibagi akoi nainamina ba se akoi mathau tare maram di kaino haikanda ayama matamda mori ki sectors se koi problematic adum koi halle the geographically di koi more sectors se more tamu se khatang connectivity state da koi ki continental connectivity da nungai ba mafam amani koi India ga Myanmar amasung atopa Southeast Asian leba ka sabna bada adubu ꯍꯧꯖꯤꯛꯇꯤ ꯁꯤ ꯄ꯭ꯔꯣꯕ꯭ꯂꯦꯝ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯦ ꯄ꯭ꯔꯣꯕ꯭ꯂꯦꯝ ꯑꯣꯏꯕꯒ ꯂꯣꯏꯅꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯏꯟꯗꯤꯌꯥꯒꯤ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯄꯣꯂꯤꯁꯤ ꯑꯃ ꯂꯥꯛꯑꯦ ꯀꯂꯥꯗꯥꯟ ꯃꯜꯇꯤ ꯃꯣꯗꯦꯜ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯟꯖꯤꯠ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯟꯁꯄꯣꯔꯠ ꯄ꯭ꯔꯣꯖꯦꯛꯁꯦ ꯃꯁꯤꯅ ꯀꯩꯗꯧꯔꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯃ꯭ꯌꯥꯟꯃꯥꯔꯒꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯤꯗꯋꯦ ꯄꯣꯔꯠꯁꯤꯗꯒꯤ ꯁꯤꯗꯋꯦ ꯄꯣꯔꯠꯁꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯔꯈꯥꯏꯟ ꯗꯤꯁꯇ꯭ꯔꯤꯛꯀꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯏꯟꯗꯤꯌꯟ ꯑꯣꯁꯟꯒ ꯅꯛꯅꯕ ꯄꯣꯔꯠ ꯑꯃꯈꯛꯅꯤ ꯑꯁꯤꯗꯒꯤ ꯀꯂꯥꯗꯥꯟꯒꯤ ꯔꯤꯚꯔꯁꯤꯗ ꯂꯥꯛꯑꯀꯥꯟꯗꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯖꯨꯔꯤꯟꯄꯨꯔꯤ ꯄꯂꯦꯇꯨꯋꯥ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯂꯥꯡꯇꯨꯋꯥꯏ ꯑꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯇꯤꯔꯤꯝ ꯂꯝꯕꯤꯁꯤꯗꯩꯗ ꯁꯝꯅꯔꯒ ꯃꯤꯖꯣꯔꯥꯝꯒꯤ ꯁ꯭ꯇꯦꯠꯁꯤ ꯐꯥꯎꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯀꯅꯦꯛ ꯇꯧꯅꯅꯕꯒꯤ ꯑꯗꯨꯒꯨꯝꯕ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯄ꯭ꯔꯣꯖꯦꯛ ꯑꯃꯁꯨ ꯂꯩꯌꯦ ꯑꯗꯨ ꯇꯧꯗꯣꯔꯤꯗꯤ ꯉꯁꯥꯏꯒꯤ ꯂꯝꯕꯤꯁꯦ ꯁꯃꯨꯗ꯭ꯔꯗ ꯂꯥꯛꯄ ꯇꯨꯔꯦꯟꯗ ꯑꯃꯨꯛ ꯆꯠꯄ ꯀꯪꯐꯥꯟꯗ ꯑꯃꯨꯛ ꯆꯠꯄ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯁꯝꯅꯒꯗꯧꯕ ꯂꯝꯕꯤꯅꯤꯀꯣ ꯑꯗꯣ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯤꯁꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯑꯔꯥꯀꯥꯟ ꯔꯤꯖꯟꯒꯤ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯤꯕ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯃ꯭ꯌꯥꯟꯃꯥꯔꯒꯤ ꯆꯤꯟ ꯀꯨꯀꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯖꯕ ꯇꯥꯔꯦ ꯆꯤꯟ ꯃꯤꯖꯣꯒꯤ ꯑꯌꯥꯝꯕ ꯀꯩꯅꯣꯁꯤꯗ ꯗꯣꯃꯤꯅꯦꯟ ꯑꯣꯏꯕ ꯑꯦꯔꯤꯌꯥꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯃꯁꯤ ꯂꯥꯛꯑꯦ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯃꯁꯤ ꯂꯥꯛꯄꯁꯦ ꯏꯟꯗꯤꯌꯥꯒꯤ ꯑꯣꯏꯅꯁꯨ ꯁ꯭ꯇ꯭ꯔꯦꯇꯦꯖꯤꯛ ꯔꯤꯖꯟ ꯑꯃꯗꯤ ꯂꯩ ꯃꯔꯝꯗꯤ ꯀꯩꯅꯣ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯗ ꯃꯁꯤꯗꯒꯤ ꯁꯤꯗꯋꯦꯁꯤꯗꯒꯤ ꯀꯤꯂꯣꯃꯤꯇꯔ 105 ꯍꯥꯏꯊꯔꯀꯥꯟꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯆꯛꯐ꯭ꯌꯨ ꯄꯣꯔꯠ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯃꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯑꯇꯣꯞꯄ ꯀꯟꯇ꯭ꯔꯤꯁꯤꯡꯒꯤ ꯏꯟꯚꯦꯁꯠꯃꯦꯟ ꯆꯥꯎꯅ ꯂꯩꯕ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯁ꯭ꯄꯦꯁꯦꯜ ꯏꯀꯣꯅꯣꯃꯤꯛ ꯖꯣꯟ ꯁꯦꯝꯒꯠꯂꯛꯏꯕ ꯁꯤꯗꯒꯤ ꯒ꯭ꯌꯥꯁ ꯄꯥꯏꯞꯂꯥꯏꯟꯁꯤ ꯄꯨꯔꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯀꯥꯟꯗꯨꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯃꯟꯗꯂꯦ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯕꯥꯎꯁꯥꯟ ꯐꯥꯎꯔꯒ ꯀꯨꯟꯃꯤꯡ ꯇꯝꯅ ꯁꯝꯅꯔꯛꯏꯕ ꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯋꯦ ꯁꯦꯝꯕ ꯂꯣꯏꯈ꯭ꯔꯕ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯂꯣꯏꯅꯅ ꯂꯥꯛꯀꯗꯧꯔꯤꯕ ꯆꯍꯤ ꯈꯔꯁꯤꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯐ꯭ꯔꯣꯝ ꯀꯨꯟꯃꯤꯡ ꯇꯨ ꯆꯛꯐ꯭ꯌꯨꯁꯤ ꯕꯨꯂꯦꯠ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯦꯟ ꯁꯝꯅꯔꯛꯄꯒꯤ ꯑꯆꯧꯕ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯀꯩꯅꯣ ꯑꯃ ꯖꯤꯑꯣꯄꯣꯂꯤꯇꯤꯛꯁꯀꯤ ꯁꯤꯅꯥꯔꯣꯗ ꯂꯥꯛꯑꯦ ꯃꯔꯝ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯏꯟꯗꯤꯌꯥꯒꯤ ꯄ꯭ꯔꯖꯦꯟꯁ ꯏꯟ ꯁꯤꯗꯋꯦꯁꯦ ꯏꯁ ꯑꯣꯐ utmost importance for the strategic reasons. aduna maram oiduna masigi project punamakchi torok matamda aikoi Mizoram se tangai fadana khatang khoigi area of concern oibra haibagi akoi puning the pausai. That's also a good initiative. I don't this say anything against it. At the same time, Luridi masigi Indian ki project si mayam sing ki lak matam da adai ki lamdam du ki mi sing sigi confidence koi mathau taram gane hai kai shukai dia tawbudabu when such kind of a koi ki equations lak matam saida power lai ragadi mayam loina tinaningi aduga mayam nungsinana adum kano sawe adu Meitei ki community ki power se corresponder e aduna power se kara shift or kibra haibagi amakaksu on the pause, the people will make friends or relatives only when one is powerful. The Meiteis are no longer powerful. Aduna, Meiteiga. Naknana lay never say advantages or rectaba or ambasuyai. Aduga, Luina geopolitics angle yang matam the decade. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Aduna, Aigi Yegna Bagi. Yegnabatu aigi marup na haiba. When sigum bagi po silak matam saida casualties se koi, especially Manipur da Meitei communities da kharahe na phangbra haibagi koi adugumba feelings sama pause aduna lairiba maram khara sing se koi tuni yengminara kanda koi hingdaba yade. We have to make Manipur a vibrant state in the years to come, in spite of all these hurdles, obstacles, and the challenges. Aduna aina young minds, especially youths, we have to be very, very productive. And we have to reorient our mindset, and we have to strengthen our social innovation. Akoi the labor, creative talents, creative ideas, in just sinarakanda, lamdam se, akoi hingbada nungaiba aduga chawkhatpa lamdam ama oinanabagi mangsi mangminaba changi kenaba khara leirambi yai aduga nungaitaba thodo watho khara leirambi yai punamaksin se akoi khajiktang tinyo thaminarakanda aikoi se as a human being ama oina pikraba chingleibak saida tuni hingminanabagi wakhlon ama semgatminaba mathau tai maramaduna all the young minds akoi se globally acceptable workforce oinanaba lamdam sida economically vibrant oiba lamdam ama oinanabagi machachi simgalakna khona matamda young people sing lawgadaba thodang sidi asuke matik chawre. Maybe in the economic front, maybe in enriching the human resource capitals, human resource productive areas. Aduga loina na akoigi identity, akoigi culture, akoigi integrity, punamak sing singak padasu. Young people sing it thodang si asuke matik wange. Adubu, we are quite emotional at one point of time. Tawadabu, tabak kutimak my partner, Chananabagi, Poram Amayalak Matamda, Emosna Henmana, Mang the Taraga Chatlagadi, Akoi Tabak Toram say, my Papagi Mahuta, Ningam Dabat Hodokea Amasu Topoye. Aduna emotions with feelings Legadovani, Imalebang Nung Shibigi Wakalun, Legadovani, Igi Chil now Nung Shibigi Wakalun, the Legadovani, Tawadabu, Sige Iroinana, Akoi. Yam rational oiba mawongda kamhain tawduna tuna hingminana chatpa yagadage chakot palamdam ama semgadage haiba sidi akhoi tangai phadana khanminaba changi aduna akhoi little areas which we can just look at for bringing normalcy. Any of the conflict situations say maliamda ayambana it should be resolved through dialogue and dialogue only. We need to think of having some sort of a dialogue in an amicably acceptable manner. Animakta yanaba mawongda koi kanminabam si changi. Dialogue si kanane initiative bigadage. Kari karamba area da ay koi yengba yai. Maramdi kenoida dialogue torabadi trade-offs lakani aduga a little bit of compromise kitang lakani kadai bhu yong na khoi compromise to boyai kadai bhu yong na khoi tawroidagi haibna chingba se khoi lepmin na ba changani aduna akhang ahi yengbiraga amangda peace committee ma semgi adubo tongan ba response masung madu kitang haphazard oiba haigadra madugi kanosi productivity obagi policy lejate aduna amuk relook the wiraga akoigi dialogue ama maybe with the third party intervention akoi tangai fadana akoi masi initiative ba changi aduga aina economy amasung future gi yengjaraga without disturbing to anybody akoi communication transport education aduga common infrastructural facilities in city akoi Mangdana thamba chungani aduna number 1 for the connectivity and the transport Ladiba highway singse Impal Pauna aduga Manipur Valley Pauna chatliba highway punamak akoi yamna secure oiba mawongda koi thamnanabagi akoi thauromama yarpiba changi aduna highway kamaina manage tawgadage karam haina highway si hena secure ehengadage haibadudi Ladiba lainga state and center both animang na koi yengminaba changani aduga one of the reasons akoi ngasi thengnariba seida atop leibaki immigrants haigadra influx illegal influx haigadra masigina achauba factor ama oi habase government of India so haibide aduga akoi da sudum pausaba mayam ama evidence soina incidents kaya da koi Laikre. Maramaduna Kedora Adoiba Taragadi. I koigi manung da hana nungshi sanana laiminariba Puru Kanglu Haidudi, I koi nungshi sanana the laiminana Aduga Awat apa chakot pagida Lamda Karakazik Atoi Ehen labor Mayam Sindo Karamana Chakot Minagadaki have to the Kanmina Bachangi Belly the labor couldn't Malona Chakot Padate Mam the belly desu Kogi Tongan Tonganba Akoigi Arvangi Ruralgi Tongan ba kano singsi lady aduga economic status se yeng jaruba matamda de kilometer tara gi radius ki wang moda Impal dagi thoki matamda lady ba economic status se adu except a few families or a few people in the headquarters of the districts I don't think they are very much in the well-off condition kashu yamne hena phaba natri yamna akoigi pathetic condition ne haina aidi thamjaningi aduna chingda sumangai aduna sigi developmental gi oiba masigi kenosing sidi akoi tongan ba mechanism amada tuna chapkhat minaba yana nabagi lambi ama koi yam holistic oiba plan ama tawhonjaninge aduga border management simadi akoi tangai fadana review tawa mathau tare. Who is managing this border? So porous. Over the last so many years, it has been left unattended kind of a thing. Changing bachatpa hoi FMR gi regime amadi lay adu erga su at least a proper regulation amadi mathau taidana. Chang bada thing banataba chang idu kanano kadam kan tholakini kadai legi haibagi record amadi koi tawbi ga dauna have. Aduna masigi border management se it has to be reviewed properly. Aduga border si kanana manage over the henna competent oibagi have a situation koi yeng min naba change. From the industrial establishment gumasida security gi karigi measures si tauge hai targadi any other koi gi security group na taude ko. CISF na tongana dedicated team mama laide have. That means they have been trained to practice on that line. Sumain daudana border simaga koi fazana koi manage tauba aduga laidiba population gi natural growth oina lakchabadi kaidaba aduga unnatural oiba natraga induced growth in the population masidi koi proper check tauba mathau tai natataragadi ngasi oribase maram amanatra maram amada aikoi normalcy la ena khallaga su atopa matam kharada amuk soidana ki akoi irang silawai haningai leite because of the imbalances in the population dynamics. Masimakti yamna achoba yam crucial point ni aduna normalcy lakpaga loina na aikoina lengang na tawhonjaning base dialogue ama initiate tawga loina na tangai fatana aikoi gi state population commission sima effectively work tawhan birakanda da lairiba ethnic communities macha sing se aikoi yeng biba changi Meitei khakiwanate Naga khakiwanate even in the Nagas or the Kukis or whatsoever is the communities there are again smaller communities mi lising ani gi mea khatang da leiba tarau gi lady ato pa moyon gi kai gi sinaching ba yam chat group su lady haba adu makhoi gi interest is koi yeng biba changani aduna government of India na hande koi gi keno sai da caste based system tawni ka haire shi aikoi Manipur dadi amuki hena yamna kupna yengaga tawbi hobose future planning gi damakta de koi yamna koi kanagani hena khanjai aduna lairiba sig dynamics in si yeng kanda akoi normal sima porok ba haiba sidi tangai ma phade aduna aigi apamba aigi aningba tawhaningba mayam ama leiraga su mangda tangdu leitana leiba kunai ama oirakanda sapkhatpa haiba kunai du oigadabanina madu laknana bidamakta khara khasi khanminnaraga kadai phau yawna thabakse pangminnaba yagadage haibaje koi mathau tai aduna young minds akoi let's be innovative yam socially yam conscious oisi thauna phasi reiba iramdam nungsiba tamsi aduga aikoi tuni hingminnabagi wakhlon amasu sagat minase aikoi hingdrabadi aikoi gi leijariba lan culture punamak singse matam gi irol nungda adum akoi tin khiba yai an akoi hingba haiba sisu mathau tai hingnanabagi damakta kanga iba poram khudi makta aikoi gi identity aikoi gi culture aikoi gi economic standing aikoi gi future aikoi harakanda da not at the cost of somebody. It is inclusive of each and every communities irrespective of caste, creeds, religion or the various sectors of the sections of the society. To na composite oiba Manipur ama sembat pada akoi mateng pangakanda aikoi gi tungi laibak se afaba laibak ama lambel ama semgat minaba honna minasi aduna young mind every single activities of yours is so important at this crucial juncture. However, we are to determine for a better future. A kazakhtang positive nota yeng jaraga yamna optimistic oina akoi khanminnase aduna lairiba issue city resolve tawnana bagi damakta tangai fadana both the governments from the center and the state they are supposed to come out a preemptive move before it is too late. Otherwise, the fate of our Manipur society is very much in a bleak situation. So let's hope for the best. And aina aroibada thamjaning base taibang sima mapuna ekhoi gi pungning wakhalda afaba wakhalon amaga loinana Manipur se anoba khunai ama semgatpada new Manipur ama semgatpada akhoi punamaki thaudang yaba ngamba madugi thauna lingjen losing pinabedana kanglup punamak se khoi nungsinana hingminana lainana bado honaminasi aduga mapandaki laiba akhoi gi irakta thingai kokaiba pibiriba punamak sibu ngakthokpirakanda akhoi lamdamse nungai yai phaba lamdam ama oinaba honaminasi aduna taibong mapuna madugi thauzal pinabiba oisnu haiba wafam kharasi thamjaraga mayam punamakpu amuka hana khurumjari. Thank you everyone.
Thank you Professor Ibohal. Mathangda koi kausan jage kai khumnajari ba Dr. Homen Thangjam sagi oiba mot khara phongdok pinabagi damakta kausan jage.
Zabu Tagaseri Aksang Zukitang Noitaba Oma Hajavatare dehydration. And I see Laksavasida, my intention was to give a presentation on the rise of alternative agriculture in Manipur that is more or less about the opium poppy cultivation. And why I want to take up this topic is because today narco-terrorism is one of the narratives which is responsible for the present violent crisis in Manipur, among others, so many factors. And this presentation, in fact, was our study that we conducted between 2019 an ICSSR research program, for which our respected Oza Priyoranjan was the director, myself and the Dr. Hanjabam Isochandra, two of us were the deputy, managers or directors. So basically it is a kind of, PhD presentation in a very linear way. When we started our study on the research program entitled Agrarian Crisis in the Hills of Manipur, Land Relationship, in that study, we have identified, from each district around 88 villages. And as a part of the study, for the first time, when we organized a kind of, talk with the NGO, with the help of an NGO, which is called Retd, based at Nungorok, we invited many of the chiefs, farmers from various parts of Manipur. In fact, the NGO facilitated our study, and they gave us the roadmap as how to approach and reach many of the remote villages in Manipur. And we did a very honest work. To begin with, when did poppy cultivation at a commercial level started in Manipur? And seemingly, when we tried to unravel that question, it was found that it started in the late 1990s. Initially, along with ganja, cannabis, poppy was planted in some areas of Urkul, and then in the adjoining areas of the Saikul subdivision, which was formerly under Senapati district and now under Kangpokpi district. For example, one of the farmers in New Samtal village in Chandil informed us that initially they started planting poppy at a commercial level way back in 1997. The seeds were procured mostly from the Tangkus and also from Myanmar, basically from the traders who were already into the trade. And today, again, we are talking about poppy harvest in Manipur, and seemingly on account of that factor, they are quiet. The hill areas or the regions of Manipur are climatically different from one another. For example, Chusanpur is a plateau, quite warm. Chandel is low range, hills or mountain, we can say, quite chilly. Tamelong is most of the time under rainfall. Urkhul, including Kamjong, again are varied. So, soil texture-wise, nutrient-wise, and the agroclimatic reasons where they are different. So in our study, what we have done is to find out, apart from why people are taking up poppy cultivation, how much do they really earn, and how pervasive is the phenomenon. So let me share our finding, and we have taken a very broad timeline. Because of these different geographical differences, climatic, agroclimatic differences, poppy is cultivated at different, in a season, but in different months from one hill area to another hill area. So fortunately, like in one of our so-identified villages, the Songpi village that you might have heard recently about, in that village, surprisingly, 80% of the respondents out of a total household of around 82, they declared that poppy cultivation is their primary occupation or the main cultivation. Only 3 households shared with us that it is their secondary occupation or secondary form of farming. And who are investing in the whole process of cultivation or the cultivation related works? Some of the petty farmers say, because the seeds are quite cheap, around 300 rupees per kilo, they do it on their own. But there are large investors whom they refuse to identify. And the modus operandum of investment is, first of all, the village should be able to collect around 50 cultivators or farmers, and to them, altogether around 20,000 rupees is given as the first installment. And another, so 25 times it will be given. Then to the chief, cookie chief, around 5 lakh rupees is given, so that land, because the ultimate owner of the land is the chief, his permission is important. And then again, another around 5 lakh rupees is given to the chief, so that no one comes near the poppy fields, or no one should sell whatever produce they make from the field. So that is the modus operandi that goes on. So in our cost analysis, taking an average of 1.75 acres of land of 2019, there are around 6 important components of poppy farming. So the cost of farming, if we have to break down, it begins somewhere in July to August in different regions, some in July, some in August, or some in September, or some in October. This is the time we can also, like, after some time we'll be witnessing lots of forest fires, etc. So the ground preparation is the most important and the most tedious work involved in poppy farming. So that involves 20 liters capacity of, spray pump, herbicides, then lever for herbicide spray, lever for clearing unwanted vegetations, trees, shrubs, etc., then lever for digging or tilling of the ground. So altogether, for around 1.75 acres of land, in this, the cost, I'll give the overall total, okay. The second important component is the ground preparation, again, for sowing. First one is the ground preparation for clearing away the unwanted vegetation. The second phase is the ground preparation for sowing, in which, weedicide like super killer. And also for seed treatment, these chemicals are used. Then again, herbicide, labor for herbicide spray, division of fields into 3 sections, leveling, digging, etc. Why they divide the fields into segments, mostly into 3 segments, 1.75 acres of land into 3 segments is because perhaps the first field, if I sow it now, might not give a very good harvest. So the second field, third field. So there will be 3 phases of, cultivation as well as reaping or harvesting. Then the third component is the seed sowing. For 1.75 acres of land, around 3 kilos of seeds are required, which is, per kilo around 300 rupees. Then the first sowing will happen, then the second sowing, then the third sowing will take place. It is not like our paddy cultivation where at one time, we spray the seeds or we make, the paddy bed seed. The fourth component is the weeding with common salt. Large quantity of common salt, around 290 kilos are used for 1.75 of land. There again, labor is involved for spraying of the salt solution. Then after spraying the solution, then the remnants have to be again picked out. So it is highly labor intensive. Then the fifth component is the injection of the plant nutrients or the plant nutrient input, we can say. So that begins somewhere between October to November. So mostly diammonium phosphate is used, around 200 kilos. Urea, that is a nitrogen, is used, nitrogen-based fertilizer, around 150 kilos. Then there will be 3 rounds of application of urea and diamond together. First phase, second round, third round. Labor is highly intensive. Then in addition to this, primary plant nutrients, they also use, something called all-purpose, plant nutrient, which you can buy from the Amway store. That is in very less quantity, only around 1.5 liters, then spray. Then finally, during the times when flower formation begins, potash is used. Harvesting takes place between January to March, but in the case of Susanpur, if they planted it early and depending on the type of the seeds, it is true, it can take place in October or November also. So, shaving razor blade is used for making incision to the bulb. Then, golden khaini kota, the tobacco container is used because there the semi-solid or the semi-liquid latex will be stored. Then the latex harvest preparation, again, first round, second round collection of the latex, up to 3 rounds. So altogether, the cost of farming comes to around 1,34,640 rupees at an average. Then what about how much do they earn? That is the question that many of us are interested in. So from 1.5 acres of land, the yield of opium, we can divide it into 3 segments: low yield, medium yield, and high yield. All right? So lowest, it will be around 3.5 kg. Medium, it will be around 4 kg. Highest can yield up to 5 and little more than 5 kilos. Then poppy seeds, which we use in many of our dishes, especially while preparing, mutton curry, khaskhas that we call it. Poppy seeds from this 1.7 acres of land will be around, lowest will be 42 kg, 45.5 medium, then 49 to 50 highest. So opium price, we have taken the index of 2019 prices, index price. So during the harvesting season, January to February, lowest will be 45,000 per kilo. Medium will be 57,500 per kilo. Highest is around 70,000 per kilo. Then again, there is something called the peak season. All right, that is, you have just started planting it, like Fautangwa. When you start sowing the seeds, etc., for the paddy, then there is a time when scarcity happens. During this peak season, that ranges between September to November, lowest price is around 60,000 per kilo, 90,000, then 1,30,000. Then poppy seeds per kilo, January to February, 100, 150, 200. Then during the peak season, September to November, 300, 325, 350. Then what about the selling price of opium? That is the range market price we find, but the actual price can, shoot up like anything. So during the harvesting season, if someone wants to sell it during January and February, per kilo, lowest can be 1,57,500 rupees, 2,30,000, 3,50,000. Then during the peak season, it can reach the minimum price 2,10,000 rupees, 3,80,000 rupees, 6,50,000 rupees. Then in the next phase, if the first season is over, and in the second phase, where the quality of the poppy is not very good, let us say, during that time again, the minimum price will be for the poppy seeds, it will be around 4,200. So how much the poppy cultivator earn is nothing to speculate. From these figures, we can easily deduce that if we take into account the input-output analysis, the cost of farming, reduce it, deduct it from the the selling price, it's amazing. They earn a profit at the lowest during the harvesting season, during January and March, 22,860, that is the lowest price, lowest profit. Medium will be around 95,360, highest can reach up to rupees 2,15,000. During the peak season, the profit margin is around 75,000, lowest 2,45,000, then 5,15,000. These are all at the international market. So here lies the lure of easy money, because although 75% of the cost of farming goes to the labor, then in the sparsely populated hill areas, where do they get the labor is another dimension of speculation. In our interviews, we came to know that even in Urkhul, in Kangpopi, Chushanpur, Chandel, Tamelong, to some extent, Myanmarese immigrants are employed because their labor is cheap. And also there is a phenomena of cross-border migration when one undertakes poppy cultivation at a very massive scale. For example, those who, because labor skill is very, very important here, especially at the time of collection, when you incise with a razor. In Madhya Pradesh, etc., they have proper incision materials, sharpeners, but not here. So you will find Kuki population, Lusai population, in a group along with the Myanmari immigrant, sometimes working in Urkhul, is pervasive. The question of if there is a angle of narco-terrorism. Way back in 2018, Lusei Kipgin, he was the DGP range officer, police officer. And most of the input we got it from him. Although he was a cookie, he was totally against poppy cultivation. Even in 2016, way back, he came out with evidence that the Kuki International Army, United Kuki Liberation Front cadres, openly sometimes served summons to the villages and also to the government officials not to interfere with poppy cultivation. Not only them, KRA and also KNA, although officially they came out with notices and commanding people not to indulge in poppy cultivation in a very clandestine manner, they also provide, security to the poppy farmers and also to the chiefs. So there is a nexus between poppy cultivators. They are the marginalized group, you can say, because there is the middleman and also there is the investors. Then where do all this opium go back? Do Manipur has primary manufacturing unit? When the war on drugs started in 2018, in 2019, one primary heroin producer, not heroin grade, but brown sugar lab was destroyed in Kangpokpi, followed by 6 more in Thawal district. Then we also had the opportunity of visiting some remote hill areas where you can get everything, where the poppy farms are there. You can get beer, you can get alcohol. It is like a resort. It is there. So the point I'm coming at is there are 3 major drug routes to, from Myanmar to India, let us say. Most important, reaching Manipur. I'm identifying only the 3 routes, the routes from Myanmar reaching Manipur. Earlier, San State was very much into opium poppy cultivation. And recently, when we visited the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes in Bangkok, 2-3 months back, they revealed that the San had given up opium poppy cultivation because there is more of chemical drugs, and they sought many samples to us whether these drugs did you come across in Manipur or not. Whatsoever, predominantly it has shifted towards the Indo-Myanmar border, the so-called Golden Triangle that was, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. In this region has literally shifted to the borders of Manipur. Berlin Littner, around 4 years back, he identified 16 heroin-producing factories or labs along the Indo-Myanmar border nearer to Manipur. So that is what is happening. So the first route is from Myanmar, Kamu, More, then Imphal. You have to be very well connected to follow this route. We can't spare the security personnel. Yes, there are hands in gloves in this trade. I'm talking about the drug trade. And the second important route is from Mandalay in Myanmar to Tidim Singhet in Myanmar, all the way to Chuchanpur. And from Chuchanpur, it goes to Champhai, then Aizawl. From Chuchanpur, it comes back to Imphal. The third most important route is from Mandalay, Manipur, Tidim Singhet in Myanmar, Champhai, Mizoram, Aizawl, then all the way it comes back to Imphal or Manipur. Subir Bhaumik, in one of his investigations, came out with the findings that 50% of the opium from Manipur goes back to Myanmar. There it is processed into find grade heroine number 4, that is the grade, and it comes back again to Manipur. And with the money so collected and involvement of the non-suspension of operation, outfits, cookie militant outfit or not, there is a nexus, and this is one of the means of, buying their caches of arms and ammunition, and also for buying many of the media outlets, and also many of the pressure groups, and also for hiring IT expert like Chanakya, who is on a roll. You Google Meitei Nupi, everything bad will come out, for making wiki pages. Where does the money come from? Does China give money to these cookie militants? Does Israel give them the money or the arms and ammunition, etc.? These are questions that we want to. Many of the scholars disagree with this narrative that whatever is happening in Manipur has nothing to do with narco-terrorism. Second group of scholars also say that using this very term doesn't benefit Manipur in any way, because the United Nations organization doesn't officially recognize the term terrorism. When Athoba went to one of the sessions of the recently concluded assembly, we know there is a phenomenon of this drug-related problem in Manipur, which is one of the factors for fueling the whole violent crisis in Manipur. Whether the United Nations organization deservedly recognize our problem or not, sharing such a perspective on the floor of the United Nations is an act of informing the larger world. So it is for the young scholars and others to decide whatever is happening, how do we grapple it and move forward. I don't have much to say, because our work was definitely on the declining or the rising agrarian crisis in the hill areas of Manipur. Many uncomfortable truths come out. Literally, many of them are giving up agriculture or horti-related activities, perhaps on the part of the failure of the government, or perhaps on the part of the officials who have eaten away the money in collusion with the chiefs, with the underground elements, whatsoever. So these are dangerous trends in Manipur. Now, more precise solutions or the way forward will come out from Professor Priyoranjan, because he was our leader. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share with you all.
Thank you very much, Homen. Aroiboina Koksanjagi Professor Angomcha Bimol Coexistence JNU New Delhi. Isagi Wapam Karapong Pinaba.
Hanu Muktada Masigi Moderator Rebiba Oza Nava, the co-panelist in Bidiba, Halaman Singh Oza, Satram Sungi Recha Chingbo, Taram Nokchabolo in a Kurumjeri. Nasi talk liba Iran si I say I first session so historical hyper port season academic hyper amagayawi. Aduna ay ani sigi drop ani si season nazaraga ay na khansaba wahai wakal khara mayam da share tawjage thengnari bisi akoina ahan bada history ga akoi ga hudik samnaba pochi kadai du uge da chahi taret khuntak pagi thoki ba thogdok rugi chahi chani suba period ne ba ngasi akoi huzik wa ngang ba matam si Chahi Chani Maning Halaga Chatpamatamda Manipur Koina Yam Satina history the Tenariba Chahi Taret Kuntak by the talking Nagimatam 1819 to 1826 Adugi period. Coincidentally, eastern side lomdagi same tholak pa port ki element ama yawse. First of all is a historical coincidence that we must be aware of it. That's the way to connect history and the present in some sense. Amana aina Churan Charpur kanne talk about 2015 is the series of my thought that I express in public. Adugi portion mati kata pathok jage mayamda. Masigi se aigi imanaba mapanda leiba nani notice ki koi activist scholar kangbom nasu. Bimol nang nahana uraba jani sidi nang sahi nipan ke dole ho gaya. You seem to knew right there and then that these things are going to happen this way. Kari to hoge amadi kari tauge hai bogi pot so ay ngasi share tok jage khara. Ay na de I ba pot ama ay mayam the share tok jage pazar ke. To all those who talk of coexistence and so year of history and civilization, the provocation that you might think is unbearable today is just the tip of the iceberg. Meitei Singh tu kanda as kang me amare provocation yam hele hai. Churan Champu the told 2015 gini ko. This was written on 22nd August 2015. I said then that this is only the tip of the iceberg. Provocation kalle sa. It's only the tip of the iceberg. Get ready for the worst. It is the test of your political maturity and strength. If one has been reading the development over the last few years, particularly the last decade, the 2005 onwards, if you have been monitoring what has been happening in Manipur, all that someone is for you to snap. That's what they are waiting for. And create what some people want. Once a conflict of once a conflict of that kind involving violence between communities happen, it sets up a new context and a situation from which returning would be altogether a very different challenge. Then I wrote further, I said, it is not easy to mend relations after a whole lot of rioting and displacement of population have taken place. As that famous couplet goes, then I quoted an Urdu couplet, Amma Iko. Rahiman dhaga prem ka mat toro, chitkaye, tute fir se jure, jure gaat par jaye. Rahim says, do not break or snap the thread of love. Once it is broken, it will not join. Even if it does join again, there would be a sign of a note. Unquote. Sigi Posi 2015, August ki tangkuni thoi, in the height of Chural Champu, the evening. Violence, holaga community funarakpa, displacement taunarakpa, spatial reorganization. Historically, the little that I have known in my career as a social science student, ethnic conflict, partition, ki talkable issue. Was issue so I give makada PhD tawanga nahamale, ako'y pangal machama. 1993 spatial reorganization kamain tawrai. Kunda kamay na ship tawgi, kanada hingon yon jangi. Adugi repercussion da identity formation na kamay harden tawrai. Hana tawram daba political strategy minority na kari loraki. All that consequences of 1993, I guess Hatra Mozik PhD tawrai. He's submitting this December. Sigi po se past and present. Displacement in the 2015, the thola adisi tori torkani high na tawgi bagi po chay mayam se. Masi ako'y nisida palliba academic / intellectual amana history po chine. Sina personal anecdote oina mamang da thamjaraga ay ngasi mayam da share tawdo is I'll divide this into 4 segments. The first segment is I will look at what I will call it intellectual intervention, its nature and challenges. intellectual intervention is karino magi challenges six kari lai ke haibam ani subada history hai karino ko ni historical ne haibagi poche oza Joykumar budi yawi oza gi feel ni ai by default some pazabagi loiner pagi khangbagi wani. Some people tend to even mistaken me for a historian. I'm not a professionally trained historian. Adu aina khangjaba aina sukhara pamjana taksaba gi paper amale ko gi course work the historical method in social science adu the yumfam moijaraga aina khangjaba history sikarino haiba pot ama ai ani subada thamjage ahum subada ai gi segment se colonial lens our realities haiba third segment iroi loi beda actors and interests asi thoiba pot se khangna na honabda ai mari sina yumfam moiraga ai han thamjage. First, intellectual intervention gi nature masing magi role si karino habse khudam moina line na ba aina sam toin toin na panjabani ai khoi gi General Musharraf ka atal biari Vajpayee prime minister oiring aida Indo Pak negotiation tawbada successful oigi deba it broke down. One of the reason is simple over an expression called Kashmir conflict haina Pakistan gi draft irapa India gi draft na Kashmiri crisis hai ai khoi swai de di era wa pangang danga nga pangi di iraga yabra ne haiba gi wasmam tabirong academic nin tawro ke do no ba. So this word, why is that in diplomacy Kashmiri crisis versus Kashmiri crisis conflict crisis ka da kari khena gezi why did Pakistan use Kashmiri conflict? The moment you use the word conflict, it serves the way they look at and their politics. Because conflict can only happen between two entities. So if it is, who are the two entities, hypothetically? Two sovereign states, member of UNO, Pakistan and India. So their project of internationalizing Pakistan is being coded in that expression called Kashmiri conflict. On the other hand, India's position is that Kashmir is an internal problem. So therefore, it's a crisis that we need to address. Hairaga in a crisis. So the word has to be very careful when we use it. Second example. Asi nupa si nupi da farak yam tai khuzi si lalu fanek na kallo na nupi na sauraga ngange. This is resisting and reprimanding and attacking the attacker. Ado seasoner iba wahay sina kari tauge se gyan tahogdab. Nupi na seliba fanek seliba missing the inferior oi haibadugi, the inferiority of the women. Adu gi mindset to na foundation or nupi the violence taurine. That anything, everything associated with women is negatively rated as pejorative and inferior. Very well-known feminist writer, Gloria Steinem, haibada akoigi menstruation ni matang damana. If men were menstruating, kaidoram dogi hangidaman. Nupa na menstruate or magadam toiba bar daga sa aiding asi sung chong tholay ngo kaya na pride oy na positive oy low gini duga nupigi associate to gini na negative oy rin na highs. So why is he amlo? Incidentally, and this is public, but I can share with you. Batman gana cinema tholay akoigi nupi menstruation ji common oy na ngang men tawe. People were shocked. Some were very happy when I celebrated my daughter's first menstruation with the cake and a dinner party. People said that you are crazy, that why you're doing that publicly. And that's the way my child learns that there is nothing pejorative about. Then I explained her the next morning. Si hananang na chain mga mamdaba, lift or mamdaba ngamdaba nangi bodily ability ano ba manang acquire tawini. This is an achievement. That's an ability of your body. Highly explained tawini. So that kind of an attitude is word, the way we see them. So the way we use words, this is the world of ideas. This is what academic institutions are. This is what universities are. We are trained to analyze, to think critically, raise questions, reformulate the ideas. That's the role of intellectuals. I quite the seminar to rock cover the pangi ira kadoino. Wanganga kadoino. E bangang giva mayam sige culture of Malay or society or magadi. I can tell you that more than 90% of the problem that we face would have been solved long time back. We did not. It's a culture. It's a formality. Sigi intellectual gi role se karino, idea gi role se karino, haiba sigi awat pama, choba malay, ngasi su tada na teb. Nganga kedo doino, ira kedo doino is. But the fact remains, I can tell you that when some of us started speaking up, it influences the people. People's ways of thinking about their real world. We may not be crorpatis and politicians with AK Paragat or Chapami or Ramdavi, but Kashulate was I calling Munang, but the Mui Bagi Wakalon, the Kalibo Wakalon, Homen Mangan Bagi power. That's the power of intellectual intervention. Universities like Manipur University say, Madugi site where this is also one of the professors of this university who was shot dead. I wrote in Free Press then, Manipur University, the Kuttingjalpirakanu, is the last vanguard of research in Manipur, say MUNI, was asking free Thadopi. I wrote, many people said I was crazy to write that article. Masi, the culture, the academics, the Akoijam, the Sumanipuda, idea, the Kananainabangam, the Bagi culture was Joykumar has already flagged off. In fact, I have mentioned him once in one of my speech. Television was on 18 October, Gidam Tenagi. I quite culture is a kaino and a hangama was on. I the hive new Waikui culture. Sigis in intellectual. Intellectual marks academic, the science low in Amle. Academic politics is terrible because the stake is low in. Academic circles yamtina satigraba politics na koi masin hunda na bise. It's not only here, it's a global problem. Karadu intellectual culture yamna rooted over the na ngang na reiba was in nupas na ngang is a personal attack on reira idea that our sigi distinguishes in ngamme. Akoi Manipur the madu aigi mota the crash solely. Hek hairubaga madia duni mana duni Madia Dani and a mead do in a tainabs. Idea to the ngang. Some young no is hatasu or no ozakang de no masenang of the. Is this person talking about certain ideas where he has a different opinion, or is he talking about that person? Masigi style say 8 hominem argument go when it doesn't help you to deepen your knowledge. Luckily, Mamangi Kanglagi issue topukamda. I was very happy to see for the first time a CS on the press release told us Yamung Supambiri. Yamung the personal attack over the CS Uduna 8 hominem argument taunagum si both the sumna yaning the Fondopi on the I was very happy to see that at least one CSO seemed to understand one problem among us, that you do not attack or express your disagreement with facts and ideas or even ideological positions, but you rather choose in low-level discourse of attacking the person. Personality, intention, career. This is a very prominent one. That is what we need to know, the nature of intellectual intervention. Loishalakpada intellectual intervention gi pot ani khak ai panjage. Ahambada Gramsci na akoigi Antonio Gramsci na well-known communist leader ni mo. Mana Kanagumba jati fruit amabu namdara thamba isa physical force kaktana namdara thamba nate. Wakalon da su namdari dubu question to bungam jata ba taurido chummaboy ninghan ba idea gi wall manasu namjala thamane dona lan to matam na mana lalong ani thong hai. Ahamba mana war of position hai. Amana war of maneuver hai. War of maneuvers na koina kulai pai da na physically lan so na risimana war of maneuver hai masina thugai doine. But he says sina di yaroi sikakta na yaroi na mana war of position hai. War of position je kaino da the way of thinking, the worldview lays it thugai. ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯄꯨꯟꯁꯤꯗ ꯌꯦꯡꯉꯤꯕ ꯃꯤꯠꯌꯦꯡ ꯑꯗꯨꯗ ꯆꯦꯟꯅꯔꯤꯕ ꯋꯥꯈꯜꯂꯣꯟ ꯑꯃꯁꯨꯡ ꯑꯥꯏꯗꯤꯌꯥ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯁꯦ ꯊꯨꯒꯥꯏꯕꯒꯤ ꯋꯥꯔ ꯑꯃ ꯆꯪꯉꯤ ꯃꯗꯨꯒꯤ ꯔꯣꯜꯗꯨꯅꯤ ꯃꯥꯅ intellectual role ama changani haina mana organic intellectuals ki role yamna chauna lai kaina mana revolutionary praxis eyes. So that is the nature of the intervention in war opposition. Ngasi thu isida ekoi na hai Meitei gi narrative se globally chatre ekoi bu aran ba tahan na leire sa huji nungdang na surga thuai ro ya ba pot na te ado nganga ga iraga tawrakada ba war ne UN da salaga I know jing noi kaina compete na table lang gi physical war na yaro. It has to be argued out. With television nganga sando issue it's wang whenever public meeting the nganga ga university set up the chalaga supposing if you speak in Hyderabad which is where the source of Akoijam narrative sibu ontoi ba mind yam tina sharp oi Manipur macha intellectual karana moina di already occupy tawrogu mani mindscape hais landscape nata mindscape se cookie ge narrative na challe hai ba jaga du changaga if you speak it's also a form of war. It's a war of position to change that worldview. I think that idea itself is wrong. We need to correct that intellectual intervention in education. Michel Foucault na mamuk piba malay role of intellectuals kay ogit again. Mana ani thong ayeng. Don't think that general will hai within court political will say intellectual same gadavanate. Magi basically every action is informed by certain ideas. Assumption ngasai assumption me amawda panik sela luhaido. There's something flawed. Nangi language of resistance na nang na resist tawriba poto mo reproduce tawre. Adigi feminist ni hairaga you know my husband is very good. He helps me in my kitchen work hairede. You have not destroyed the fundamental assumption that cooking is not a naturally given duty of the woman. Man is quite capable of doing that, but by using the word help, you are reproducing the fact that it is essentially a woman's job. That's why you said my husband helps. Aduna wangangak pasida magi assumption leriba mayam do thugai ba ma changi madugi job to ni intellectual na tawgadab sena Foucault na hai. That's a primary job of the intellectuals. Through his analysis and his critical engagement with these assumptions behind the actions, repeatedly mistake say that's intellectual roles according to Michel Foucault. Then he says, as for general will, political will, he says that the intellectual takes part in that general will development as a citizen. Political will high. So that's the aspects of intervention by intellectuals. But intellectuals is not everything. There are different wars. Duga poti masakhang machangani. And matangi the Torakado wars C. Wrights Mill in a sociologist namana limits of intellectual intervention. Ay nakitang yaning mam yawe. The more you know, the more helpless you might feel at times. See, she writes me, and I can sense it in my life. 2012 and 2017, as well as in 18, the two chief ministers I have lobbied. Paper the form by Matou Tade. I'm just so high the Nihanda crisis talk with the Matam lawyer Tanani Aina, a public Tangang Bahura. I lobbied with one of my friends. Particularly in the Sheptuna and Logevani, Ibo be shame they haze. Saktung pidung dre hyper discourse amalay idea amalay yupam oiraga. Separatist tendency lay autonomy demand or ma'am something to ibam changyaduna such a report ki type the high level committee to Sembiu aduga facts and figure to Tambiu because I know one of my students from Nagaland who was the first PhD from her tribe. Magi walk to in a design to bokan ko in a survey to buda isan Nagaland ga atopa advanced tribe ko lay which is comparison to whenever ISTI index siengera and the nangi participation in the state structure kamai yenga. I know the condition. We are not the same. I quote the far more propagandist pot ama yaure duna factual data mayam ta tungcho thamsi asuba yaram magasu that will also enable us to take corrective measures in a ill level. Kumhei magi appointment pibirakpani, we end up speaking for 2.5 hours. He called up a lot of people, journalists and others, and he did announce. I think Yambung knows the story behind it, but it did not implement. Then Akoigi President Singh Naombir in Orakanda, one of the first things, 2 months after he became first-time CM, I went and chat with him, and I insisted that please do this thing. That was 2017. My only regret is that I am not in that structure or power to take decisions. That's the limit of intellectuals. That much you can push for the ideas. Karne wala koi aur karega. Somebody will do it, and you need to know that intellectuals are not everything. We have different players, civil society leaders, politicians, economic class, so many people, bureaucrats. So we need to understand as an intellectuals where the dynamics happen. Aduka kadai da pinpoint or kadai da namakanda thabak se thon bayai habido. It must be an informed adudanaina Karl Marx ke am nungai se. Whatever action that we do must base on what he calls it, I quote it here, concrete analysis of the concrete condition. You need to analyze that way. Sisna ahanba intellectual intervention in nature. Second, very quickly, ako in history hypothesis ay Michel Foucault dagi mo hogjage. Karigumba present ki problem ama deal do matam daman hai. When we analyze the present, it casts a shadow in the past. Ay ngasi se khang na labo na matam da maning halachat kanya ba koy maning halachat ba man genealogical approach ko magi approach na. So history hai ba poche koy karino ngasi palisay pot mari thona muktang samdam da ai hai sake. History ga past ka kari mari lainai, history ga memory ga kari mari lainai, amasung history ga memorialization hai ba terms ga kari mari lainai hapse. Yam quickly. Past is a moment in time. Matam mamagi tangkak amane ba past ai se. Maduge maramda iba musung naina ba duna ne ko na history hai risna. Aduga memorialization hai na thoki ba thokdok to bu ngasi ko na ningsing palon kumon palon pang thokodo. These are all different things. So history is not past and history is not memorialization. And some scholars also try to distinguish between memory and history. Well-known Marxist historian like Eric Hobsbawm says, "Aigi history sa, akoy babagi memory sa aigi the history oy biyay." That means when you have encountered something yourself is part of your memory. So 1970s, late 70s, Manipur, Iran, it's not a history for me. It's a memory for me. But for the children who are born in the 90s, that will be part of history writing. So this is one way of distinguishing between history and memory. Atopamana, memory is the realm of the vanquished. So history is for the victors. So history ga past ka kaino sa ina distinguish ta uri maramdi when we do a historical analysis what it means sigi poche. Ani suba aspect of history dana. History as an account of event haibamaga amana as a part of the event itself haibamaga. Karigumba thokiba thogdoma gi maram de iba history is mani yengma miyeng ama history hai amana history se thoiba event tu ki saruk amoin uba. This is Sudipto Kavira's ki word hairagana. Indian nationalism ki movement ki saruk amaneba Indian nationalist history ibais. When the historian writes about the growth and nature of the Indian nationalist movement, history itself said, nationalist movement so we can look at history as two different things. Either you look at history as an account of event or as a part of the event itself. Masigi important Anglo-Kuki war, adagi Chibu gi the challenge or is yam intellectual Kuki scholars in the challenge or is. So writing Zhou history haiger, Kuki history haiger, it's not an account of the event of Zhou nationalist movement, but it is part of the Kuki nationalist movement, Zhou nationalist movement. Sarup never. Just as Sudipto Kavira says, writing Indian national history is part of the nationalist movement. Therefore, writing Kuki history is part of the Kuki nationalist mobilization. Aduna masi tawba matamda intellectually ekoina madu irakpa matamda contest tawgadabane. That's the job of the historians and intellectuals. Contesting aduna ni contestation in history is also a contestation of power aina akoigi Partho Chatterjee namagi Nation and Its Fragment the Eid. It's a subaltern school gi taught ni historians in hena kangbira wani. So that is the second aspect of history that we must keep in mind. That history is not about past account event ki account kadanate thoiba thogdoksing dugi saruk amane se koi kaudba pai. Ahum suba process history gi nature da to look at history as something called out there in the past haibama amana history as in here in the present haibami ngamusule. Many historians will tell you that history is not necessarily out there in the past, but history is in here as a part of the present. Merger is not out there in the past. Merger is in here in our present. Why? Because you have armed movement, political movement. So merger is not out there. Merger is part of the same dynamics that happens right here and now. And the present, when a past the history matanga, past is something that exists out there in a Newtonian sense. The lower the present it is in here. The physics the lower Newtonian the reality of the Cartesian dichotomy is out there and Einsteinian physics the observation that we do is the observe as well as the observe, and the act of observation is part of the same process that we are observing. Haina yamna dynamic oiba miyeng the yeng was a historian maraktas dum laybase. So past must be seen as forming a matrix in here and now present. Aduna I say merger example. So merger is not out there dead, not there. It's alive in our mind, and we are trying to discuss and we are responding to that situation. So it's part of the present. Last history narrative either you see history as a narrative or history as a discourse. This is also very familiar among historians. History is there. I don't know whether how accurate. Joykumar, correct me if I'm wrong. History as a narrative versus history as a discourse. Roughly history as a narrative. Wari masisi token wari libama. Amana history as khana nainaba kari umama khana nainaba goina sigi miyeng sisu historian marakta ani le duna koina loselakpada historical background I say history as karam miyeng de yeng adagi habidu gi chaurakpa makoina aina issue karam yamda thamjabane aina yeng jabadadi I tend to take history as part of the event, especially when I'm addressing the present issue, and history is not out there, it is in here. And history is not merely a narrative, but also is a part of a discourse. Asigi miyeng di yang kanda ay third segment da muksangjage.
Kita samjan ba yawra Bimol matam.
Ay si deni ko gi oza yari kay samjan na bitaw zarge. Colonial lens and our reality. Hill valley ge divide si da koi kok da hill is kaino, valley is kaino, bohuzi boho koi fazana gyan tanadriyo. When you 700 square mile, I say, is the central oval valley dugi size ne se koi kawe. You have reproduced this reality repeatedly, which is wrong. Manipur as a mountainous part have lot of valleys. Khopum Valley, Chandel itself, Chapikarong itself, Churachampur town itself, these are part of valleys. So geographically speaking, when you calculate the size of the valley in this mountainous terrain called Manipur is more than 700 square miles. See, conceptual category, clear. So my appeal to all of you is never ever use valley in the singular. Please use hills and valleys of Manipur, have you plural. Aduga, enumerated identity versus fuzzy identity in a colonial lens, the census or a nang na kukira nang na classification ki census ki problem ma chaw na lay adu dagi tholak pa identity mayam yawre duna koi gi sudu to kaviras ki work to yaw pot ni mase Bernard Cohen na anthropology samana su mana fleck drop toram ba issue ni that the census and the practices of the state ends up creating new identities and reify them. I aduda changjaroi matam ji tension lamna phatwar kala haijarage. Chingtam gi khenaba Assam da panbu do koi da panjal lambagi ai hanjan jan hairaba wani masaduna I repeat tawjaroi. Adegi enumeration to state ke practice da cookie among all among lok talk sigi se is basically a problem with the census ki state ke practice ki poni. Scholars must look into it, which is a very familiar part among the scholars though. Hi, but colonial yengamba miyeng do da aiko isade yengzaba hore. Just as women are said to see themselves exactly in the way a man would look at them. Adumaina colonial kampun uramba miyeng do gi lens da aiko isade yengzaba dagi chingtam khetnei haibagi posa aiko loinamakte ingrained over the last 100 years, and leads to what Charles Taylor called it social imaginary. Haidi aiga moiga kari mari lenai aigi world se kari no haibagi entire world view sa sigi colonial lens ne structure tawroga leibni mase unpack tawba mase akogi deconstruct tawba machangani, and it is here that intellectuals must play a big role. Mathang dana masigi last segment the yauris na Indian state ka akoga kari leni ke so akoi ngawbam leire as if Manipur was created by the Indian state, post-colonial Indian state. India is a karino, Indian state is a karino say, Mayam Nakana Bigadra in Aramam Somarindro Memorial Lecture Loirapada. I left two questions. I think nobody cared, it seems. I said, did the coloniality arrive at the moment of the post-colonial or depart in Manipur? Second question, when did Manipur become part of India and problematized India is a karino. The India that you and I know was born in 1947, and it was constituted by elements like Manipur. Manipur guma mayama mana punja laga same giba state ni sigi Indian states na aikoi da semak pana te se aikoi kawo pate. And therefore, aikoi na instrument of accession pi giba matamda isana isabu ngakthok jana ba defense ngamada ba gi power da. It was already handed over to the federal government of India then. And therefore, the union government is legally, morally, and politically obliged to defend Manipur. Union government, it was part of the instrument of accession and its juridical legacy. The defense is with the Indian state, not with us. Aduna masigi Indian state ka ikoy lainabda political, economic, subversion of democracy, counter-insurgency mechanism, maming panjaraga toksaraga, high river mayamsigi detailed discussion ma koi changani so that we understand what's happening today. Adugi historical process, history as not out there but in here as a part of the process. Last segment, actors and interests. Kariyuma social scientific way of looking at a phenomenon. This is something we call it intentionality high. In sociology and anthropology, this is called functionalism. Intent ama capture tawnom da kana na ko major players say yengo yengbi akoy yengo matamda. One of the contemporary interests karina shift there is an ideological structure am lay. Ngasi laiba Indian nationalism we move sa. It is highly centralized, homogeneous, one nation, one text, one nation, one law. Haibagi potni hana formative years 75 years mamang de leramba. Federal gi ethos karasu yauramba union gi kaino se loinamak tawgraba pot matam sida aikoi gi ngasi gi leiliba koi position ji kari oibam thoi haiba se koi munna khanaba ma changi aina ramam somrendo memorial lecture da su panjaramani patron client relationship between New Delhi and Imphal shapes the behavior of our political class ngasi su dum imang da taw colonial period na Kolkata kya kahenge hairamduna post-colonial period, Delhi kya kahenge ne koi leis. Asigi minai na thangi wakalon ma mana thamai ba culture amai koi dalai mase I think it needs to be unpacked to liberate ourselves from our mindset. Sigi liberation siga nangi akoi nung ngasi ta uriba ngasai gi liberation movement na nongmeng ka pa the basic foundation aina haizer is the mioi bu khunai ma inge ai ta di isa gi decision isa na lobjabo ngam ngasi Manipur da thok le sa aikoi gi state government na lobu ngam li brai sa yam thina dangerous of indication which have been flagging off in national media. Article 355 su sibo ko gyan ta na dri trup thaja lai requisition notice pira kan da thara ira kana na tawri no se who's actually running the show in Manipur se aikoi hang deba koi se pasan We need to do this. Aduna sigi federal structure de yamna kai ba yawi. Last atay di ekatsarage. Political players in the moigi ngasai high structural context da mai magi paisa hai na talo na ba mathangi vote kana na bo na ba narco terrorism kari kara la iba mayam sigi gi interest counter insurgency gi player mayam sigi interest ta aikoi na yamna luba ngasai ga ina important na pick up tawjari di Hill Valley divide se leram dragadi your structural changes in economy or narco terrorism will not take this form. So we must be able to prioritize when you do an analysis what is the fundamental axis and its corresponding intersecting dimension. Centuries old colonial lens and practices the lakiba Indian state nasu henama kanjala lama 1960 onwards kanjala lama port mayam ki contradiction mayam lay C is in a basic foundation webini natana masigi divide leram dragadi narco terrorists or economic structure changes la kera social change ki mobility ki transformation la kera it will not take this form isa masi koi kaw do the form that it takes as a divide and separate administration and you, us versus them la iba potsi masigi dynamics si koi number 1 masi mamang da thang da bani aduga rest of the factor ma'am say we must brought in to do a proper analysis and the basic to conclude ay nga sa haiji ke dumaina we need to have intellectuals from this university and other university in this state or outside us. We need to galvanize ourselves because unlike political class, institution like MU must exercise its autonomy. Subservient in a wangang but I think the moment you yourself stop protesting that, no one will save you. Kishore Kumar gida Chingari and same lay. He hon yam itak ipong Rajesh Kanaga ganuga Shamilate Gorga Chingari and ato we say yam layvane. Koi bharke to goma adaida linam yawego yawida. Itak ipom yam kanba marakta he hon baduna turel lantok pirambang namangani. Adubu he dubu he holy miduna lufal lagadi kanana kandoino and say them yaw. Academic independence, intellectual freedom exercised over that. It cannot be defended by XYZ group. It must be fought tooth and nail by the academic community themselves. Therein lies Akoijam responsibility and one of the role that we as citizens, as academics can play. But I've already laid out what are our roles and our limits. Adu Khangaga, we need to do this job and I expect Manipur University to lead this struggle from the front. Thank you.
Thank you, Bimol. Koyozik, learned resource persons, Marie the Yitongan but perspective the Han the session ye, Tim Gamari Lenana, Wapam Kia, Tambikre now, Hoxixi discussion ye, Matamamakak Layado, I wonder some Pangjabada, Matam the 15 minutes behind where I do one kitang hand about the 20 minutes Kumbagi. Matamamatang Tamzage Aduga, Limestone of Yaduna, Hosit Koi Lengson Diriba, Mang the Lengson Diriba, or dancing in Maratagi, some question Gumba, Koi Hen a clarification, Pambi Bugumba Layragadi, question and out, discussion again, that question and Sargi, Matam Kitang Pizage, Aduna, hard with the Isa, the Sakta Piraga, Handiga the question do. Hangbida ba ningsing jari kitang point at view sum na observation sang na PB ba nataba. So now it is open for discussion. Microphone makada. Makada microphone.
I question raise the tolling the Bunny and what I Matangi, the panelist Wabrina, Atubu. A clarification of Haktan was that joy, I seek to the Nimba. Was I say, Aham high kanta, our civilization is 1,000,000-year-old. That was quite concerning to me. You know, that Dr. Lalji, Professor Lalji gave very seminal work on the migration of Homo sapiens from East Africa to Australia. Japan, India, the Laga Takivasi. from 60,000 to 30,000 BCE the Chatki, when there was an ice age haidara but the panba adagi narrative khara hojik thui ko kangla da phangba sarts khara 20,000 year old way thermoluminescence that organizer it is all fake. It's ambok the 20,000 years old over archaeological survey of India discovered Toragan the international journal the form with the way was solely like there because as about the latest 10,000 years old was must confirm the weekend because this is basically a physical anthropology site again. Aduga Amana Ozana Thambigi Bukanda, the classification of the hill people into the Kuki and the Nagasi is a colonial leftover ni haiba. The Meitei the Soquina Kanjarapakanda, Sing the Tabasi, Makal Ani Thokna, Adam Hainarami, Aman Awang How, which is basically the Nagas, Adoga Kaki How Haina. Those were migrants from Burma. Sigi Matang was Adagi clarification, Chipamze, the Homen, I was very interested because I have been doing studies on the poppy cultivation in Manipur since I left the state administration in 2017 and I started writing on large-scale poppy cultivation in Manipur. I have written a number of articles and I keep on correcting it. Technology say, even the harvesting system, the technology, see what we have seen in 2017 have changed now in 2022. The deep incision side of the Ohumarica, I mean, the small productivity is a hangle a haidana. Adagi Manipur da lab silay. Lab si Homen Harisi Amsumi, the brown sugar is not exactly brown sugar. Brown sugar is a final product. Inert material half of heroin number 3 that is called brown heroin base. Brown heroin base, heroin number 1 sineba. Number 2 is a white heroin base ni. Heroin number 4 is a pure heroin hydrochloride ni. Heroin number 3 is a inert material half of main lining glucose smoke zinc oxide chalk the Manipur the ina Chachabakanda Ahamada Valley the Ayamba Lerame the Hujiksu Ching the technology is Afghanistan technology is what is known as the lime method, which is not very efficient from the chemistry point of view. Other dotted way. The income the moment you started converting into the brown heroin base or heroin hydrochloride, then the price shoots up like anything. Aduna Manipur da makeshift lab that the San state that very sophisticated lab never. They can convert 10 kg of heroin into 10 kg of opium into 1 kg of heroin. Manipur the lime method 25 kg of heroin opium in 1 kg that convert to whatever. But even then, the profit, say 30 lakhs invest Orakanda, he can earn about 3 crores. The Sigi observation, there is a comment, paper, panelist explain the winner with thumbs up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nimai Nathamiba. The question is very. I chumi from a technical point of view. I na Thangjam just an example you are the name. Maramdi Kadua technical of Chahi, should have been naturally. Maramdi Equigi meaning ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯤꯚꯤꯂꯥꯏꯖꯦꯁꯟꯒꯤ ꯄ꯭ꯔꯣꯁꯦꯁ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯂꯩꯔꯤꯕꯁꯤꯡꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯑꯋꯥꯡ ꯀꯧꯕ꯭ꯔꯨ ꯑꯁꯨꯄꯥꯏꯅ ꯀꯧꯕ꯭ꯔꯨꯗꯒꯤ ꯈꯨꯟꯗꯥꯔꯛꯄꯁꯤꯗꯒꯤ ꯂꯧꯔꯒ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯁꯤ ꯁ꯭ꯋꯥꯏꯗꯒꯤ ꯁꯨꯝ ꯇꯧꯕꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯒꯤ ꯀꯣꯟꯁꯦꯞ ꯑꯃ ꯂꯩꯔꯝꯕꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯑꯥꯔꯀꯤꯑꯣꯂꯣꯖꯤꯀꯦꯜ ꯐꯥꯏꯟꯗꯤꯡ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯂꯥꯛꯄ ꯃꯇꯝꯗꯒꯤꯗꯤ ꯃꯗꯨꯒꯤ ꯂꯩꯔꯝꯕ ꯀꯣꯟꯁꯦꯞ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯃꯥꯡꯈ꯭ꯔꯕꯅꯤ ꯃꯔꯝꯗꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯗ ꯑꯣꯜ ꯄꯦꯂꯣꯂꯤꯊꯤꯛ ꯑꯦꯖ ꯅ꯭ꯌꯨ ꯄꯦꯂꯣꯂꯤꯊꯤꯛ ꯑꯦꯖ ꯄꯦꯁꯣꯂꯤꯊꯤꯛ ꯑꯦꯖ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯅ꯭ꯌꯨꯂꯤꯊꯤꯛ ꯑꯦꯖꯒꯤ ꯄꯣꯠ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯍꯥꯟꯅ ꯈꯪꯉꯝꯗꯦ for quite long time ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯀꯣꯟꯁꯦꯞꯁꯤꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯑꯋꯥꯡ ꯀꯧꯕ꯭ꯔꯨ ꯑꯁꯣꯛꯄ ꯂꯥꯏꯃꯥꯏ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯃꯤꯁꯤꯡ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯐꯥꯔꯁ ꯁꯦꯇꯜꯃꯦꯟꯁꯤꯗꯒꯤ ꯀꯌꯥ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯒꯤ ꯀꯣꯟꯁꯦꯞ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯂꯥꯛꯄꯁꯤꯗ ꯃꯗꯨꯃꯛꯇꯤ ꯅꯠꯇꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯗꯨ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯊꯝꯅꯕ ꯍꯣꯠꯅꯕꯗꯅꯤ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯃꯗꯨꯒꯤ ꯑꯦꯛꯖꯦꯛ ꯐꯤꯒꯔꯒꯤ ꯀꯔꯤꯒꯤ ꯄꯣꯠ ꯑꯗꯨꯃꯗꯤ ꯑꯩ ꯃꯗꯨꯃꯩ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯆꯨꯝꯃꯤ ꯌꯥꯎꯗꯦ ꯑꯅꯤꯁꯨꯕ ꯀꯣꯏꯁꯟ ꯑꯁꯤꯗ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯊꯝꯖꯅꯤꯡꯉꯤꯁꯤ ꯆꯨꯝꯃꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯁꯨ ꯇꯥꯏ ꯑꯋꯥꯡ ꯍꯥꯋꯥꯏ ꯑꯗꯨ ꯍꯥꯏ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯊꯝꯕꯤꯕꯗꯤ ꯉꯁꯥꯏꯒꯤ ꯄꯤꯌꯣꯔꯂꯤ ꯗ ꯀꯣꯟꯁꯦꯞ ꯑꯣꯐ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯏꯕꯀꯤ ꯀꯣꯟꯁꯦꯞꯁꯤꯗ ꯂꯥꯛꯄ ꯃꯇꯝꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯗꯤ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯏꯕ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯍꯥꯎ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯗꯨ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯏꯕꯅꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯂꯧꯕ ꯇꯥꯔꯒꯗꯤ that we don't know ꯃꯔꯝꯗꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯏꯕꯀꯤ ꯀꯟꯁꯦꯞꯀ ꯍꯥꯎꯒꯤ ꯀꯟꯁꯦꯞꯀ ꯑꯩꯉꯣꯟꯗ ꯈꯤꯇꯪ ꯈꯦꯠꯅꯕ꯭ꯔꯥ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯈꯜꯂꯤ ꯃꯔꯝꯗꯤ ꯆꯥꯏꯅꯥꯒꯤ ꯀꯔꯤꯒꯤ ꯂꯩꯕ ꯄꯣꯠꯁꯤꯡꯁꯨ ꯂꯩ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯍꯥꯏꯂꯦꯟꯗꯔꯁꯀꯤ ꯀꯣꯏꯁꯟꯒꯤꯁꯨ ꯂꯩ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯎꯖꯕꯗꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯁꯦꯞ ꯇꯥꯡꯈꯨꯜ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯇꯥꯡꯈꯨꯜꯅꯤ ꯃꯔꯥꯝ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯦ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯃꯔꯥꯝꯅꯤ ꯃꯥꯎ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯦ ꯃꯥꯎꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯃꯥꯒꯤ ꯏꯊꯅꯤꯛ ꯒ꯭ꯔꯨꯞ ꯑꯗꯨꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯌꯦꯡꯖꯔꯒ ꯃꯗꯨꯅ ꯐꯦꯛꯇꯔ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯒ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯕ꯭ꯂꯥꯡꯀꯦꯠ ꯅꯥꯒꯥ ꯀꯨꯀꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯁꯤ ꯂꯩꯔꯝꯗꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯍꯥꯏꯖꯕꯅꯤꯗ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯀꯨꯀꯤꯒꯤ ꯇꯥꯝꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯈꯣꯡꯖꯥꯏꯅ ꯍꯥꯏ ꯑꯗꯒꯤ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯦ ꯐꯣꯔ ꯑꯦꯛꯖꯥꯝꯄꯜ ꯕ꯭ꯔꯤꯇꯤꯁꯀꯤ ꯀꯣꯂꯣꯅꯤ ꯔꯥꯏꯇꯔꯁꯤꯡꯅ all cookie group ne hari bising si anal si akoi anal adum hai koi cookie hai ti moyon mon sang lamgang tarau gi myam lai ado gi concept ge hai jabati maram ai whole focus area do di ai da sai akoi sing si ju yam ne hen no bonati akoi chu yam ari ba matung gi hono ko lai ra bani habi concept la ai tham na ba di ai technical go report sai asuk sore ba sai asu lak pa du lak pa habi du di ai changjan dalu da bani
ꯑꯩꯒꯤꯗꯤ ꯌꯥꯝꯕꯨꯛꯅ ꯊꯝꯃꯛꯄꯗꯨꯗ ꯑꯌꯥꯝꯕ ꯑꯟꯁꯔꯁꯨ ꯌꯥꯎꯔꯦꯅ ꯎꯖꯩ ꯑꯗꯣ ꯑꯗꯨꯗꯗꯤ ꯌꯥꯝꯕꯨꯛꯅ ꯍꯥꯏꯗꯣ ꯌꯥꯝ ꯆꯨꯝꯃꯦꯅ ꯑꯩ ꯊꯝꯖꯅꯤꯡꯉꯤ ꯇꯦꯛꯅꯣꯂꯣꯖꯤ ꯍꯦꯁ ꯏꯚꯣꯜቭ ꯑꯗꯒꯤ ꯃꯣꯏ ꯁꯨꯛ ꯁꯥꯡꯕꯗꯣ ꯀꯔꯤꯕ ꯌꯥꯝꯕꯨꯛ ꯀꯛꯅꯕꯒꯗꯣ ꯍꯧꯖꯤꯛ ꯇꯣꯄꯥꯁ ꯕ꯭ꯂꯦꯗꯁꯤ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯁꯤꯖꯤꯟꯅꯔꯝꯕꯗꯒꯤ ꯕ꯭ꯂꯦꯗ ꯑꯌꯥꯝꯕ ꯁꯤꯖꯤꯟꯅꯔꯝꯕꯗꯒꯤ ꯕ꯭ꯂꯦꯗꯁꯨ ꯊꯨꯗꯦꯛꯇꯣꯏꯅꯤ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯅꯥꯀꯟ ꯑꯃꯃꯝꯅ ꯇꯧꯔꯝꯕꯗꯒꯤ ꯍꯧꯖꯤꯛꯇꯗꯤ MP ꯔꯣꯝꯗꯒꯤ ꯂꯥꯛꯄ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯗꯤ ꯁ꯭ꯇꯦꯠ ꯃꯔꯤꯗ ꯁꯤꯖꯤꯟꯅꯕ ꯃꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯐꯥꯔꯝꯗ ꯐꯥꯔꯃꯥꯆꯨꯇꯤꯀꯜꯁꯀꯤ ꯑꯗꯨꯒꯨꯝꯕ ꯈꯨꯠꯂꯥꯏ ꯏꯀ꯭ꯋꯤꯞꯃꯦꯟ ꯀꯥꯁꯨ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯁꯤꯖꯤꯟꯅꯕ ꯍꯧꯔꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯌꯦꯕ ꯌꯥꯝꯅꯀꯣ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯑꯗꯨꯃ ꯂꯩꯔꯦ ꯉꯁꯥꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯤꯃ ꯂꯩꯔꯦ ꯑꯇꯣꯞꯄ ꯑꯃꯅ it's not a highway economy poppy cultivationꯁꯦ interiors ꯑꯩꯅ ꯉꯁꯥꯏ ꯁꯤꯌꯔ ꯇꯧꯖꯍꯧꯗꯕꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤꯏꯍꯥꯟ ꯍꯥꯟꯕ NGO ꯒ ꯇꯧꯔꯒ ꯐꯦꯁꯤꯂꯤꯇꯦꯠ ꯇꯧꯔꯒ ꯄꯨꯟꯕ ꯀꯥꯟꯁꯤꯗ ꯂꯥꯛꯑꯣ ꯎꯠꯄꯤꯒꯦꯅꯦ ꯕꯣꯔꯗꯔꯗꯅꯤꯅꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯝꯃꯒ ꯃꯥꯅ ꯅꯨꯡꯉꯥꯏꯕ ꯋꯥꯔꯤ ꯑꯃ ꯂꯤ ꯉꯁꯥꯏꯒꯤ ꯕꯣꯔꯗꯔ ꯑꯦꯔꯤꯌꯥꯁꯤꯗ ꯄꯣꯄꯤ ꯊꯥꯟꯕꯒꯤ ꯀꯨꯀꯤꯈꯩ ꯐꯠ ꯂꯥꯎ ꯆꯠꯈꯤꯗꯣꯏꯅꯤ ꯆꯠꯈ꯭ꯔꯒ ꯃꯊꯟꯇꯁꯤꯅ ꯂꯦꯕꯔꯁꯤ ꯄꯨꯔꯒ ꯊꯥꯔꯨꯔꯒ ꯁꯤꯖꯟꯁꯤ ꯂꯣꯏꯔꯝꯃꯒ ꯒꯣꯁ ꯚꯤꯂꯦꯖ ꯑꯣꯏꯗꯣꯏꯅꯦꯕ ꯑꯁ ꯅꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯏꯇꯩꯃ ꯍꯣꯏꯁꯨ ꯀꯅꯥꯁꯨ ꯂꯥꯛꯎ ꯌꯥꯗꯦꯅ ꯑꯗꯨꯒꯨꯝꯕ ꯃꯌꯥꯝ ꯂꯩ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯠ ꯁꯠ ꯇꯧꯔꯝꯃꯒ ꯃꯥꯡꯈꯤꯕꯒꯨꯝꯕꯒꯤ ꯄꯣꯔꯇꯦꯕꯜꯒꯤ ꯃꯑꯣꯡꯗꯁꯨ then finally war on drugs ꯑꯣꯖꯥ ꯄ꯭ꯔꯤꯌꯣꯔꯅ ꯍꯦꯟꯅ ꯊꯝꯕꯤꯔꯛꯑꯅꯤ doesn't have a policy ꯑꯃ ꯌꯥꯎꯗꯕꯗꯧꯅ ꯎꯏ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯁꯤꯃ ꯑꯩ ꯑꯣꯄꯣꯔꯆꯨꯅꯤꯇꯤꯁꯤ ꯂꯧꯔꯒ ꯊꯝꯖꯅꯤꯡꯉꯤ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯑꯦꯒ꯭ꯔꯦꯁꯤꯚ ꯑꯣꯏꯕ ꯃꯑꯣꯡꯗ ꯀꯃꯥꯏꯅ ꯇꯧꯗꯣꯔꯤꯕꯅꯣ ꯏꯟꯗꯤꯌꯥꯒꯤ UNODC ꯏꯟꯗꯤꯌꯟ ꯑꯣꯐꯤꯁꯇ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯑꯄ꯭ꯔꯣꯆ ꯇꯧꯖꯕ ꯀꯥꯟꯗ ꯍꯟꯗꯛꯇ ꯉꯁꯥꯏꯒꯤ ꯆꯦꯟꯖ ꯑꯣꯐ ꯄꯔꯁꯣꯅꯦꯜ ꯃꯣꯏ ꯑꯣꯐꯤꯁꯔ ꯆꯦꯟꯖ ꯇꯧꯔꯛꯄꯗꯒꯤ ꯃꯈꯣꯏꯅ ꯑꯌꯥꯝꯕ ꯁꯦꯇꯦꯂꯥꯏꯠ ꯏꯃꯦꯖꯤꯡꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯂꯩꯔꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯗꯨ ꯒꯨꯒꯜ ꯏꯃꯦꯖ ꯑꯣꯏꯕꯅꯤꯅ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯁꯦꯡꯗꯕ ꯉꯥꯛꯇꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯂꯤ ꯑꯦꯛꯁꯄꯦꯟꯁꯤভ ꯑꯗꯨ ꯃ꯭ꯌꯥꯟꯃꯥꯔꯒꯤ ꯕꯣꯔꯗꯔ ꯑꯦꯔꯤꯌꯥꯁꯤꯃꯗꯤ ꯊꯥꯏꯂꯦꯟꯅ ꯇꯧꯔꯒ ꯃꯈꯣꯏꯗꯤ ꯇꯧꯍꯧꯔꯦ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯏꯟꯗꯤꯌꯟ ꯑꯣꯐꯤꯁꯇ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯤꯌꯨ ꯍꯥꯏꯕ ꯀꯥꯟ ꯃꯣꯏꯅ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯒ ꯀꯩꯒꯤꯅꯣꯀꯣ ꯁꯦꯇꯦꯂꯥꯏꯠ ꯃꯦꯞꯄꯤꯡꯁꯤ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯇꯥꯡꯉꯦ ꯍꯥꯏꯕ ꯌꯥꯝꯀꯣ ꯆꯨꯝꯃꯝꯒꯗ꯭ꯔꯥ ꯑꯩ ꯈꯪꯗꯦ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯍꯧꯖꯤꯛꯇꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤꯁꯨ ꯍꯧꯔꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯁꯤꯒꯨꯝꯕꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯒꯣꯔꯃꯦꯟꯅꯁꯨ ꯃꯈꯣꯏꯒ ꯇꯥꯏ ꯑꯞ ꯇꯧꯕꯤꯔꯒ ꯕꯤꯀꯣꯖ ꯁꯝꯇꯥꯏꯝ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯑꯦꯛꯁꯄꯦꯟꯁꯤভ ꯑꯣꯏꯕ ꯄꯣꯠꯇꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯒꯣꯔꯃꯦꯟꯅꯁꯨ ꯉꯝꯗꯕ ꯌꯥꯏ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯐꯥꯏꯇꯔ ꯖꯦꯠ ꯁꯤꯖꯤꯟꯅꯔꯒ ꯂꯣꯏ ꯃꯩ ꯊꯥꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯗꯨꯃꯗꯤ ꯈꯤꯇꯪ ꯊꯥꯖꯕꯗ ꯋꯥꯠꯄꯗꯧꯅ ꯂꯩ ꯍꯥꯏꯕꯁꯤꯃ ꯑꯩ ꯊꯝꯖꯤꯟꯖꯔꯒꯦ ꯊꯦꯡꯛ ꯌꯨ ꯌꯥꯝꯕꯨ
Thank you. Koi kana question atopa lebiragadi hangbiro.
Good evening to all. Thank you to all the speakers for your wonderful deliberations. My name is Singh. I'm a research scholar at the Department of Political Science. My question is to Oja Bimol. Oja, at the end of the speech, you mentioned about the homogeneity of the Indian state. If you look at the ruling regime, which is in other sense the politics which is Hindu nationalistic or Hindutva. So if we come to Manipur, we also have the same party in the state. So is there any form of the majoritarianism in our state? I want your view on this.
Top question lebi Ibrahim.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adashri Moirangtham, and I'm a research scholar in Department of Political Science. It's not a question particularly, but I would like to seek Sir Bimol's opinion or comment on this. As Sir has mentioned regarding the compromise of the federal structure of the country, and as well as the unclarity regarding the imposition of Article 355. So keeping all these in mind, I would like to seek your comment or opinion on, are we leading towards anarchy as a state? That's the...
So, okay, ani sinaloy ko. Bimol, please.
Bagi question do I understand how the poche ani thong we badana Indian nationalism ki character do Manipur ka kari mari leine gi haiba wapam man ba ma ko ani subadana Manipur ki history writing itself is aduga haipet man abra haiba BJP na pai bagi ko India si kamaina sema khige haiba gi account macham ai briefly thamge ko ai koi gi to cut a long story short, 1858 the Queen Victoria's proclamation in Lucknow the pathok ba port GMLA whenever. After the what we history we call it Sepoy Mutiny, Sarvarkar na the first war of independence. Incidentally, which is what the historians are using it also. Adugi matung da Queen Victoria na torokpa proclamation da akoi Manipur implicate over port ama yawe. Report nota Indian subcontinent higher Indian continent subcontinent and the lady poche sigi territories adugi proclamation broadly it was divided into two parts. British India haibamaga native states haibama native states atopa colloquial sense so Indian states so high in some paper aduga princely states so high. These are three terms they use for that second set of territories. Native state, Indian state, and princely state. Ani thong tu wives karai de kari implication like the ma see British India the responsibility is Queen's responsibility. The man directly governed or any high never. All the subjects are my subject. Their well-being is implicated in me or in my rule. Aduga native state things ki subjects things they I want to directly implicate tau de moina rule tau ne level. Sigi international jurisprudence so you can almost see two sets of entities. One directly governed by the British, which is called British India. And I couldn't see the neighbor confused. The post-colonial Indian state was not coming out of the British India alone. It was coming together of British India as well as the native state. Masigi port 2021 I say 1921 the Chamber of Princes and amasu hang eba moina for consultative among this native state so we have two elements British India and Chamber of Princes iga lakna basina round table conference or kumatamda 1930s ago following the recommendation of the Simon Commission ani se punjal laga political entity masim na bahot neba adugi negotiation ni when a round table conference na tawise adurei da Patiala Maharaj hoise moina leading figure oi Bhopal gi nawab hoy moina chatlaga negotiate taweba princely states se kaino da Simon Commission ki recommendation da ani se punjal laga administrative reform to hairak paneba adai da moina hama hangeba what is our place in the new federation aiko ye power mang doira hai kan the paramount power highness is in wise something that we must remember is not written down document but paramount power is a convention number one There's nothing written thoroughly in the table. Second, it differs from one state to another state. The British exercise over powers state within the same state also viceroy powers. So it's a very fluid, conventional power that they exercise. Legal document princely state clarify to you, write down what constitutes paramount power is one of the demand during roundtable conference by the Chamber of Princes. Yanada than a drop out of Reva Prince, Yauro Federation Sidaina. Six federations in the Government of India Act 1935 in the Tolakanda, Article 5 and 6, if I remember correctly. It is this new entity is defined as Federation of India. Bicameral House Lainiamana. House of State that I'm going to introduce model. Princely State Mayamsi representative Lakadam implement Yaudre. History textbook that you might encounter saying that Act of 1935 was partially implemented. Sigi 35 ki ek sigi Makada Vivi Menan neighbor bureaucracy na brain, he is the main brain. Mana Tauraga, Patilda, Mukta Emen Taurakanda instrument of vexation to generate Toguneva. Do Makadalon Yahola Kanda India as the same given. Sigi Aina Palaiseka, you know, that these are called among the subaltern historian fragments of India. So Indian history is not a monolithic, homogeneous pattern where the Indian nationalist imagination, subaltern historian, it is through these fragments that you must imagine the whole India. Sidani aina hamba nangi answer the high says Sigi contrasta Hindu nationalist project right from the early 1920s. Some authors says 1922 is a marker. 1925 you have RSS form. Sigi thrust in asagi cultural nationalist imagination, quite like what is known in literature, the German model of nationalism. The folk which speaks a common language constitute a nation. Sigi ito cultural nationalist strict amalaeva. Sidana homogenizing and homogeneous strict saleva. Adugi inheritor ning asilaiba right-wing historical writing styles and now the second part of the question, which I think in your question, koi Manipur so history iba matamda Meitei centric yam oibane and it is state centric. Incidentally, in 2006 Ramam Somarendo Memorial Lecture to give one big segment is on this history as a site of conflict in Amyaw. I have suggested that we should be writing not a state-centric and a Meitei-centric history. Try out. Scholar must produce social history or history from below. An example of Zupiramani. Use Shumbagi history of the EU. When you write that kind of a history, what happens is identity enclave, bounded identity, ma'am, tholak pagi mahuta, intersectionality, ma'am, urakaneva. You namana sungni season, navanamana seasonani, you sungna seeing the community matharkane. So you will set a network of relationship. So we should be writing as a response to our fragmentation in the Manipur. Social history is an emphasis because I said that political history is state-centric, you will end up making vanquish out of your fellow citizens. Sigi 2005, August Tamopradik paper, the Mr. Chief Minister, you got the date right, but not the month in an article evening. Adugi once also I call it Manipur writing of history is monochromatic. Sigi look Buki scholar ma'am the Thomais. Sigi the historical new debate in historiography. I know a lot of young scholars are writing against this. Aduna ne international audiences sangakpa matamda ekoi vocabulary is outdated. Wangang na bayado mi dong no Meitei scholars ek uge the race. But luckily we have young bloods. I've seen some scholars. They know exactly this language, so they started retaliating or rather responding in a decent manner, including book crisis. Some Meitei scholars, I have seen it. One of them is teaching in Delhi University. So that's the question. Aduga, Amaduna 355, quickly. Che haurak padang asagi India ze kai hidore gi fears je partition tholak pagi violence una he na kikalaktana ngasagi 1935 to Europe iba federation in no sanja. Masi largely negotiated, adubu reality forced the maker of the Indian constitution and the then political establishment to concede to the very multicultural, multi-historical trajectory Labour continent. Adugi accommodate organi. They have debated in the Constituent Assembly whether the word should be federation or union. which ultimately Article 1 uses the expression union over the word federation, because federation has a loaded term, magi historical baggage. Adugi kiwagim adugi form to the Indian Constitution is federal in structure and unitary spirit and laido. Now to conclude, that nasagi nationalist history gain ngasai high culture nationalist project to homogenizing tendency duga khosmoina state structures the pyrak matamda. Increasingly now that Indian federal structure, which was flagged up by, say, Sarkaria Commission, for example, although it's gone to the docs almost now, so one nation, one takes, one language, one education, is masigi homogenizing lakpada. Unlike the existing condition in the Constitution, Article 355, I just want to make a comment. It's embarrassing for us. I have raised this question to Karan Thapar also. He wasn't aware. 355 chalai re hairadi. Technically, I know how much 355 thing ever say. Supreme Court judgment of 1997, November, APSPA ki they all ever. Because they justify APSPA through Article 355 that there is a moral, political, and legal obligation on the union government to use army to protect internal or external aggression karikaradi. Aduna, my reading is that when you say 355 is imposed, without dismissing the government, what you do is that you take over the law and order situation, which is in the state list by the union government. The only provision you can do is Article 355. Adu use the way hire. Ko namu use the way namu hire. Use the way tau de nga si bo conflict lay reba. BJP ke president even chitiem so ithing azare. Adu sung clarify tong so hire ba. So all these 5 years, what we have been doing, who's calling the shot? Is the removal of DZ the decision of the Manipur government, or is it the union government? Is the sending of troops is a requisition by the state government, or is it imposed on them? And remember that last but not the least, the tailing sign where we are getting caught up and we don't seem to care is that who's calling the shot today? Because unified command ki nature si the CM the chair of the Kashmir was the same thing. Now it's not in the hands of the CM. So there is a politics ki erosion of federal structure. I have warned the national media people. Today it may be Manipur. I said exactly the line to Karan Thapar. You have seen certain thing in new development here. Laidiba dispensation in a federal structure ke erota was that. That is happening today. You are watching because it's Manipur. It can happen anywhere. That's a danger. That's the feature that we see here. But as an intellectual answer, we need to raise these issues. And that's one of the things I said. India was constituted by elements coming together of entities like Manipur. It's not created by the post-colonial Indian state. Incidentally, entry number 19 in Indian Constitution, Schedule 1, you just see the definition of the Manipur in Indian Constitution itself. It says, Manipur had definitions, the territory which was administered as if it were a chief commissioner's province under the name Manipur before the commencement of this constitution and even. Sige constitution housing agi mamang the later entity is the Indian Constitution which recognizes. Nasaigi princely state ma'am sang iba ma'am do. This is my last remark. There were 3 for 75 years almost. Magi territorial integrity kaidan later entity princely state ahum khata ne ba yaw gidu. Jammu and Kashmir was one of them, Manipur is the other, and Tripura is the other one. Now Jammu and Kashmir has been broken down. My fear is that what is happening today is not necessarily territorial, which might also happen, but primarily the very spirit, very ethos, very character that defined Manipur to fasana chugai and law away. Akoi se machet ta the when laiti akan the kona the earning the bagi samjalaga santigra yomaga salute to trust me, we are in that situation now. Frame amana power leveni mingsi and amas a kaira and the frame to kai the bagi mingtin to kai tarakta when frame the look the kaira never say. So what we need to do is that kai the mingsi say ano mingsi and amachan mama talk to have a frame to kai and vida. And that's what I have been saying, that you have to have that vision. We have to have a new Manipur invention, reinventing ourselves. That's the duty that I think vision people. So it's a huge role of the intellectuals that we have.
Thank you. Thank you. Matam zu later banina han the session si sigi matang si that loy sanjare and mayam that lok tok sari.
ahamba technical session asibu mapung phahan bibagidamak ikai khumnazariba moderator resource person Singh amadi tinbiriba mipum khudingmakpu thagachari. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform to one and all gathered here that our lunch break will be of 30 minutes. It will be a great pleasure to have you return to this hall on time. Bon appetit, everyone. With this, we conclude the first technical session. Thank you.